across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and a very good evening to you. Yes, welcome to The Late Show here on Talk. It's Phil Dave in for Petrie Hosken with you until 1 o'clock tomorrow morning. Coming up on this evening's stroll through some of the big stories of the day, yet another day of playground fighting in the world of Westminster. It's all hitting the proverbial fan, and frankly, it's sensational and pathetic in equal measure to watch. Let's say Sir Keir Starmer's gone, what, by the end of the week? Who realistically could take over from him? 0344 499 1000. The walls aren't just closing in on Downing Street. Frankly, they're catching fire. Today at PMQs, Keir Starmer didn't just face an opposition, he faced a firing squad, with Kemi Badenoch demanding his immediate resignation and his own backbenchers breaking ranks to decry a government defined by own goals. The Prime Minister is fighting a war on three fronts here: a mutinous cabinet, a vengeful civil service, and a public that is fast losing faith. The Mandelson scandal has mutated into a full-blown crisis of cronyism, from allegations of secret lobbying for plum diplomatic roles for his inner circle to the brutal ousting of the Foreign Office chief. The scent of blood is in the water. As senior ministers swerve questions at the Labour heartland, basically, is deciding to, well, what can I say? Just turn their back on their own party. It's absolutely extraordinary. Has Keir Starmer absolutely lost control of his own party, and not to mention his future? 0344 499 1000. That's the phone number. Do get involved in the conversation, because I would love to hear from you this evening. You can also text 87222. Just obviously make sure that you start your message with the word talk. Please do remember that, because otherwise it disappears off into the ether and we'll never see it, and that would be a great shame. Also this evening, of course, we've been hearing all day how there have been, well, rebellions from the youth of Britain, I would suggest, and we know full well that there are plenty of people out there now, about 50% of young people, who frankly say they would never bother fighting for this country. Well, we're going to be speaking about that, but we're also going to be talking about the fact that tonight the Attorney General is under fire. A bombshell investigation, as reported in the Daily Telegraph, reveals Lord Hermer pursued a decade-long witch hunt against British war heroes, allegedly ignoring warnings that the war crime claims were nothing but lies. Was the government's top lawyer helping insurgents sue our own troops? Veterans are calling it treason, and I suggest it's scandalous, and it appears to go to the very heart of number 10. The Al-Swady files are open, and the fallout starts right now. We'll also look, by the way, at a couple of other stories. A staggering new poll has revealed a nation divided by more than just age, but by the very idea of duty. 50% of young people say that they would never take up arms for this country. Not for king and country, not for democracy, and under no circumstances for a future they no longer believe in. With only a third of Generation Z expected to live better lives than their parents, the message is loud and clear and frankly devastating. Why fight for a country that isn't fighting for you? From the crushing weight of student debt to a housing market that has slammed the door shut on the youth of Britain, they're opting out. They see a political system that frankly treats them as an afterthought, and leadership that doesn't represent their values. Is this a crisis of patriotism, or a rational response to a nation that has left its youngest behind? Well, to react to both of those stories, we'll hear from former British Army officer and former Shadow Defence Minister, Colonel Patrick Mercer. Also this hour, what do you make of this? In London's booming rental market, the law says the door is open to everyone, but a damning new investigation has revealed a shadow market where the rules of Equality Act simply do not apply across Facebook, Gumtree and encrypted Telegram channels. Landlords are illegally slamming the door in the faces of thousands. advertising Muslims-only rentals and explicitly filtering tenants by religion, race and nationality. Really? From Walthamstow to Barking, the message being sent is don't bother applying, whether it's demands for Muslim boys only or direct appeals to specific ethnic groups. These listings aren't just preferences, they are a direct violation of British law. Now, while some point to shared living spaces as a bit of a grey area, the reality on the ground is a blatant no to anyone who doesn't fit a religious profile. Is this a case of communities seeking comfort, or is it a dangerous erosion of the fair play values that underpin our society? We'll be looking at that with the former head of religion and ethics at the BBC, Akil Ahmed. At 11 o'clock, founder of Fairfuel UK, Howard Cox, will be here to review Thursday's front pages. It'd be great to have Howard back in the studio, so make sure that you join us for that. And then at midnight tonight, it's Talkback. Well, Talkback is, of course, the hour of the show that is dedicated to you and your comments, because, as you know, here at Talk, your opinion most certainly matters. So I want to hear what you think about all of the stories that we will be covering this evening. I want you to answer the following question. Is it ever acceptable to be selective based on race or religion? 0344 499 1000. Get those calls in nice and early, please, and we'll be sure to have a chat later on. Let's spend what's left of Wednesday evening together. Stick with me here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good evening to you. This is indeed Talk. It's Phil Dave in for Petrie Hosken with you until 1 o'clock tomorrow morning here on the home of common sense, where your opinion matters. So please make sure you get your opinions in nice and early. 0344 499 1000. I want to hear from you on all of the subjects that we are talking tonight, but in particular, the question I have for you is it ever acceptable to make segregations or decisions based purely on race or religion, especially when it comes to making selective choices? 0344 499 1000. You can also text 87222. Start your message with the word talk. And of course, you can send a WhatsApp note to 0344 499 1000, whether that be a traditional message or a voice note. Loads of ways to get in touch. Absolutely no excuse. Now, I have to say a huge thank you to Jill, who has very kindly sent in a message, which is most flattering. Don't want to read it out because otherwise it's like self-praise, but I'm very grateful all the same, Jill. You're very kind, I'm quite sure. OK, let's get into this, shall we? Because the government's top legal advisor is tonight in the crosshairs of a staggering investigation, frankly. Lord Hermer, the Attorney General, and a key ally of Sir Keir Starmer, by the way, is accused of leading a relentless witch hunt against British war heroes, despite being warned that the allegations of murder and torture were absolute lies. For a decade, decorated soldiers were dragged through hell, accused of atrocities in Iraq by claimants who weren't innocent farmers, but actually members of an Iranian-backed insurgent group. Emails revealed tonight show Hermer was told the claims were nonsense and implausible as far back, get this, as 2008. Yes, 18 years ago. Yet he reportedly pressed for massive taxpayer-funded payouts anyway. And now, veterans are calling for his resignation, and former military chiefs are labelling the scandal nothing short of treason. Amen to that. Is the man overseeing the legal basis for Britain's future wars the same man who tried to put our own soldiers behind bars? This isn't just a legal failing, it's a battle for the integrity of the British Army. To react to this story, I'm honoured to welcome former British Army officer and former Shadow Defence Minister, Colonel Patrick Mercer. Colonel Mercer, well, my goodness me, I would rather we weren't talking about this, but it's a great honour to have you on the show. A very good evening to you.
Hello, Phil. Having me on, you must be easily pleased. You really must.
Well, I fully respect anyone who has served in the armed forces, unlike Lord Hermer. So as far as I'm concerned, it strikes me as that I'm really genuinely struggling to find the words here that are strong enough. Baffling is a good start, but we're talking about people in our own government, our own political elite, going after our own armed forces. What? Sorry, this is insane at the best.
It's extraordinary, Phil. I agree with you. I fear that it is not as unusual as you think. Now, what Lord Hermer's motivations for this are very difficult to say. Perhaps it is simply greed.
Well, there is definitely that suggestion, but yeah, I mean, of course, that's an allegation, but yes.
It's an allegation, of course. These are all allegations. Nothing is proven. I'm simply suggesting that might be the case. It might also be ideology. The man is left-wing. I have absolutely no doubt that he disagrees with elements of the British establishment, particularly those which could be seen as being post-colonial in their outlook or ridden with class. In other words, the army. Many people would have that. Or perhaps it is simply, as has just been said, perhaps it's simply treasonous. Whatever it is, Lord Hermer seems to be aiding and abetting our country's enemies. And I don't think I'd better go into anything else, any other names that I have heard, but there are also suggestions that there are other members of the government who are working for precisely that aim as well, the downfall, not just of British military personnel, but the downfall of this country as we understand it.
But Colonel Mercer, can I ask you, what on earth does that send as a message to our amazing troops who, I mean, let's be honest, we don't have that many of them at the moment as it is, but just the fact that they still, after everything that has been done to, whether it is the cutting of the budget of the armed forces, whether it is this revolting example of going after and trying to prosecute members of the armed forces, what message does it send to them?
Well, you've got to ask all sorts of other much more complex questions than that, Phil. Why, if you want to join the army, as an example, why are people finding it almost impossible? They contact the various sites which are recruiting for the army. They never hear back from them. I can tell you at least 3 or 4 people here in Newark whom I know who've tried to get into the army, get no reply from the recruiting system. Wow. Therefore, these sorts of things suggest to me that governments of all stripes, not just the Labour Party, but it's going on for a long time now, are actively seeking to allow the armed forces to wither on the vine. If you look, for instance, at the current confrontation that's going on inside Ukraine, the army, by the Chief of the General Staff, was put on, by, in his words, a war footing a little over 4 years ago. In other words, get ready to fight, lads. You will be supported. You've got to be supported. And all the kit that you need, all the personnel that you need. Now, since then, simply the Army, not the Navy and the Air Force, we can talk about them separately, have enjoyed or endured a reduction in numbers, a reduction in funding, and a reduction in fighting capability. In other words, the governments simply are not backing our troops. They don't wish them to go into action. They will never use them in action if they can possibly avoid it. And I do believe that they wittingly, knowingly, and criminally, the British Armed Forces are being allowed to, I use the phrase again, wither on the vine.
I can't get my head around it. There is literally not one part of that makes any sort of sense in any rational world. You know, even if we lived in what people still describe as peacetime, let's be honest, it is not. But let's just say that there was total peace in the world. Why would anyone think that we are that immune to any sort of attack that we could do without armed forces? Now, I know full well people are going to turn around saying, no one's saying we're doing without them. But I'm sorry, but by cutting them and by allowing them to wither on the vine, as you say, that indicates that people are either complacent or anti the armed forces, one way or another. That's pretty horrendous if you're trying to lead the country.
Well, I don't think everybody would agree with you, Phil.
There are plenty who don't.
Clearly, there's a perfectly respectable and responsible pacifist position. I don't happen to agree with it. I suspect you don't. Now, but if the government were to say, look, we are pacifists, this is what we believe, and we are going to try and create in the country the or to stop the country ever getting involved in armed conflict again, and our response to any aggression will be to turn the other cheek. I don't agree with it, but I respect that. I think there is something more sinister than that going on. I say not just from the Labour Party, but from the Tory party as well, making it impossible for our armed forces to get themselves into harm's way. Politically, you can see the political argument. This very sort of adventurism, call it militarism, call it post-colonialism, whatever label you want to give it, actually caused the downfall of Tony Blair. Prime Minister Tony Blair. Those that have followed him, with one or two exceptions, would probably say, we're never going to get involved in foreign adventures again. We're just not, it's politically too difficult. Therefore, let's not bother putting money into this Rolls-Royce organisation that we've got. Let's not even try to drive this Rolls-Royce ever again. It would be a lot simpler if the government simply came out and said, no, we're going to become neutral. Again, that's a perfectly respectable ideology, not one that I follow.
It might be perfectly respectable, but at the same time, that I also think goes on the basis that other countries who may pose a threat to us think along similar lines, and we know they clearly don't. So to my mind, it's just a little bit like saying, I live in a neighbourhood where there are burglars. I'm not going to bother with a burglar alarm because I hope they realise because I don't burgle anyone that they're not going to burgle me. That's the way I look at it. It really is, if I'm trivialising it, that's the way I see it. It's judging other people by what might be our desired standards, but let's be honest, they're kind of not. So, look, I mean, I personally I just don't get it. Don't get the mentality at all. But let's talk about one of the other stories that has made the headlines today as well, and that is that this rather staggering new poll, frankly, has shown something in the way of a divided nation, because apparently around 50% of young people, I'm not sure what defines young people, but they have said that they will never take up arms for king and country. And it basically means that they would never go to war for the UK. Now, of course, if this country did ever enter war, I believe that there would be a major problem with that. And I almost believe that whether or not they say they won't fight, some of them might not have a choice. What do you make of this?
I can remember when I was at Oxford, a long time ago now, people saying to me, oh, you're going to the army. I could never dream of doing such a thing. It was deeply fashionable at university to say this sort of thing. Similarly, later on as a professional soldier, out recruiting, you would haul down a young gentleman in our case, but I mean, ladies now as well, but some time ago, you'd haul down a young fellow on the side of the street and say, I think you make a jolly good sort of, oh, no, I don't want to fight. No, good heavens. Particularly if they were in front of friends and wanted to cut a particular figure of when it comes down to it, if you look, probably the most recent example in British military history was the recent campaign, war, call it what you will, inside Afghanistan. When that happened, our recruiting figures, Britain's recruiting figures, went through the roof, or at least applications to join the army went through the roof. I honestly believe that this is a pose, that if it were to come down to it, young people, there's absolutely nothing wrong with the younger generation at all. I believe they would come forward and they would serve their country loyally in the numbers that we need.
Well, I also think it depends how it's being set up. You know, I reckon, first and foremost, I have a great concern of the way that there are multiple factors at play here. But I think that sort of one of the biggest ones is it seems to be this continuous subliminal messaging, the way we need to be somehow ashamed of this country, or we need to be embarrassed by our flag, and we need to, if you like, almost be apologetic for the way that this country behaved in years gone by. And so if you're sort of, not you, if one, if you like, is being taught, I suppose, to be ashamed of the country, why would anyone in their right mind fight for that?
Well, I think that's right. But then, as you know, people are gullible, people are biddable, people like to follow the rest of the crowd. Look how easily influenced our population was during the so-called COVID outbreak. People did outrageous things without questioning it. Now, if Britain can be influenced, if British people can be influenced into the idea that there is a cause worth fighting for, I suspect that they would line up, as they did in 1914 and 1939, etc., and actually fight for the country. And interestingly, I think that to use the phrase, the pitch is already being rolled by the government in trying to get youngsters used to the idea they may have to fight by talking about things like conscription. This country has never really conscripted except for brief periods during the First World War and the Second World War. Now we're talking about it in apparent, to borrow your phrase, in apparent peacetime. People are being got used to the idea that they're going to have to fight. When it comes to it, I suspect they will.
No, I hope so, because I would think it's a dreadful shame, not only for the fact that we could lose how great this country could be, and I do believe that somewhere buried beneath all of the murkiness and the nonsense that we see in this day and age, I do truly believe that there is a great country crying out to come back. And I think, for what it's worth, it will do before long. I just realise we're going through a bit of a rough patch at the moment. But even if you put that to one side, I also worry what an absolute insult it is to all of those, whether it be recent individuals such as your good self, who have fought for this country and have been in the military, versus also those, of course, who fought in years gone by and made the ultimate sacrifice. You know, just it seems such an insult to all armed forces personnel to say, nah, I won't fight for this country. Why? I mean, look, I'm not going to pretend I'd be thrilled about it, but if I passed medical, I dare say that I would rather fight for the country than to lose what I know it could be.
Well, Phil, I'm sure you'll be an ideal recruit for my regiment. I'll put your name forward.
How very kind. I don't think I'll pass the medical, but you're very kind.
But just going back to these youngsters I was talking about, I keep talking about this. These are four lads that I come across fairly frequently inside the garage that looks after my cars for me. All four of these boys, I suppose they're aged 19 to 23, 24, something like that. They've all tried to get into the armed forces. There's nothing wrong with these lads. They're full of good, loyal instincts. They're fit. They are determined. They would make good soldiers, sailors, or airmen. They would. And their motivation is dead right, as I see with the rest of that generation whenever I come into contact with them, which these days, I'll admit, is not that frequently. The fault doesn't lie with the people that are going around drawing opinion polls. It lies with the fact that we have a government, we've had governments that don't wish to exploit these loyal, nationalistic, and I use that in a proper sense, these loyal instincts of the generations are waiting and are not yet being allowed to serve. I have every faith in them.
And even if, you know what, if people think that nationalistic is something in the way of a dirty word, I don't personally, but you could always go with patriotic, which I sort of certainly think is a huge asset to anyone to have. I personally consider myself extraordinarily patriotic, and I just can't bear the thought of anyone hating our country that much who lives in this country that says it's not worth fighting for. So I guess the final question has to be, what do you think that we could and should be doing to make possibly a career in the armed forces more attractive to younger people?
Oh, well, make it easier to join.
Well, I mean, apart from the obvious, yes.
But get a proper recruiting organisation working on the ground. Phil, I've said this before. I took over command of my regiment it's a long time ago, more than 25 years ago now. We were about 15% undermanned, and I was told it'll never be possible to get much more than about 85% manned staffed, if you like. Within a year, we had 120% fully, not wow. Just manned, but overmanned. The
Amazing.
Methods that we used all that time ago, I promise you, could be used again very successfully if only governments of every stripe would allow the armed forces to get on and do their business properly.
Well, amen to that. I have to say it has been an absolute treat to speak to you this evening, so thank you very much. Colonel Patrick Mercer, who's of course former British Army officer and former Shadow Defence Minister, very much appreciate your time. What do you make of all of that? Do you know, I can't believe that we don't have anything worth fighting for in this country. I guess maybe even I'd ask, would you fight for this country? 0344 499 1000. Nigel's message says, evening, Phil. Only half would join the UK military, but only 10 to 15% of 18 to 20-year-olds in the UK would successfully enlist. That means that 85 to 90% would not qualify based on medical, fitness, aptitude and background checks. Not the best. Yeah, I haven't even thought of that. Thank you for that, Nigel. Gracious me. All right. Well, I can see that we have got a voice note here from Martin. So we'll have a little listen to what Martin has to say. You can also send a voice note as well. 0344 499 1000. What do you say, Martin? Would you fight for this country?
I would fight for my kids. I mean, I'm 54. I'm just about ready for the knacker's yard. But I would still pick up arms and I would die for my kids, not my country. I would do it for my family, my kids.
Bravo, that man. And you know what? I think actually that is probably the way a lot of people feel as well, is that they would be tempted to do it for the benefit of them and their loved ones, and possibly not the country as a whole, because look, I'll be honest with you, I think there are plenty of people in this country who I would certainly not be tempted to fight for, but a fight, I think, for what I believe the country could be once more, if that makes sense. So I don't think that anyone would be tempted to fight for what it is now, but how good it could become in the future, that's what I think that we've got to fight for. 0344 499 1000. Your opinion matters. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is
indeed Talk. It's the Late Show. Phil Dave in for Petrie, Hosken with you until 1 o'clock tomorrow morning here on the home of Common Sense. Very much already enjoying what you have to say. Thank you very much for your messages. Do keep them coming and keep your calls coming as well. 0344 499 1000 if you'd like to join the conversation, because I would like to know whether or not would you fight for this country? Would you know anyone who would fight for it? And do you think we've actually got anything worth fighting for, really? The question I've also got for you is based on this bizarre story we're going to hear about in just a moment's time, about how there are adverts for properties going out in parts of the capital advertising for Muslim-only tenants. I'm asking you whether or not you ever believe it is remotely acceptable to make selections based on race or religion. 0344 499 1000. Get in touch and have your say. Like Aaron has done. Aaron says, I'm from a unionist part of Belfast who supports our veterans, but unless the country was being invaded, there's not a chance that me or anyone that belongs to me would fight in a war for this government to be treated like third-class citizens when the war's over, or to worry about being jailed in 50 years' time for war crimes. That's from Aaron in Belfast. And you know what, Aaron? I get it. I understand completely. I think that you speak for a great number of people who also would feel exactly the same way. Why would they fight for a country? And I don't think you fight for the government. I do think you fight for the country. I do believe that. Why would you fight for a country when potential governments might look to put you or your comrades in prison for just doing what you were doing, for following orders? Seems absolutely bizarre. I mean, bizarre is not a strong enough word. Treasonous, treacherous, revolting, whatever you want to say. Julia has messaged, say, good evening, Phil. My granddaughter, the age of 17 and 3 months, is joining the Navy on Monday. Oh, bravo. And she goes on to say she's hoping to be a submariner, and we're all very proud of her. Quite right too. Especially her dad, who was in the RAF for over 30 years. That's Julia from Mansfield. Well, if I may, I would love to salute your granddaughter, Julia. That is very exciting indeed. It's nice to know that there are some young people out there who would indeed fight for this country. Let's remind you, by the way, that TFI Friday Unplugged is back on Channel 4. You may like to know, because your favourite TV show from the 90s is back. Chris Evans and the TFI Friday have returned to their original home of Channel 4. And for the next 5 Friday nights, from about 11 p.m, reimagined for the 2026 audience by Virgin Radio UK, TFI Unplugged features A-list interviews, music and classic bits from the TFI archives. 30 years on. How to make us sound old, hey? That's watch TFI Friday Unplugged. It's from 11 p.m. on Channel 4. And this week's guests, by the way, include Chris Marshall, Emma Led, and from the archives, Paul McCartney. Sounds one not to miss. Indeed, it's not. So 11 o'clock on Friday, TFI Unplugged. Very exciting. 0344 499 1000 if you would like to join in the conversation. And I'd very much like you to do so. Get your calls in nice and early, because you know what? The lines get busy later on. And it happened last night. I did try and warn you, but it's very simple. If you don't get your call in early and then you hear something that makes you think, oh, actually, maybe I do want to say something, we then get in this situation where there's an influx of calls and we don't have time for all your calls. But I want to speak to you, because I know that you have an opinion on everything that has been discussed this evening. I know that you've got something to say about the debacle with Lord Hermer. I mean, fancy wanting to prosecute our armed forces for protecting our country. Sorry, that is what it boils down to. Who in their right mind would do that? Well, allegedly Lord Hermer would, but why? Why would you even think of taking armed forces to court in a hope to try and get them thrown in prison for simply protecting our great nation? 0344 499 1000. We're also talking about this story that sees that 50% of young people would refuse to fight for this country. Now, I understand why they think like that. How many years have we heard successive governments tell us that we should be ashamed by our flag. We should be embarrassed by our history. We should be apologising for all the terrible and nasty things that this country has done over the years. And the fact that we should be paying something in the way of reparations to individuals who, well, let's be honest, are the descendants of people that maybe Britain of yesteryear might have done wrong by, but they're certainly not the ones who've gone through the problems now. Reparations, I'm sorry, I really struggle with that. Truly I do. Exactly the same way I would never expect reparations from my family being expelled during the pogroms of Russia, you know, and not to mention the subsequent world wars, the torture and the murderous activities that Jews had to endure during then. I would never even contemplate saying to anyone that someone owes me money as compensation for what my ancestors went through. Anyway, I digress. I'm going off on topic here. But my point being is that so many successive governments have tried to tell us how embarrassed we should be by our once great nation. And I'm not embarrassed. I'm very proud. I'm so proud of all that Britain has achieved. I am not proud of what's becoming of it now. So I understand why around 50% of young people say that they would not fight for this country. But the difference is, I think we've got something worth fighting for. And I believe that if we could just prove that we are going to turn the tide and actually start to become a proud nation again, and more importantly, to be proud of our nation, well, then maybe we'd see a very different polling when it comes to asking young people would they fight for king and country. The question is, would you? 0344 499 1000. You can also get in touch via text message. Send a text, start your message, by the way, with the word talk to 87222. And you can also send a WhatsApp message to 0344 499 1000. And that WhatsApp message can either be traditional text or it can be a voice message. If you are going to send a voice message, all I ask is try and keep them relatively succinct. You know, maybe try and keep it to around a minute tops, because otherwise, well, what can I say? You know, it's my name on the show, not yours. I'm just saying. 0344 499 1000. Do get in touch. And by the way, I should tell you that those calls are charged at national rate. Right. Coming up in a bit, we are going to be speaking to Akhil Ahmed, who is the former head of religion and ethics at the BBC. And it's about this story that says that there are certain properties being advertised in our capital city, and it actually stipulates, are you ready for this, that only Muslims need apply for the tenancy. Is there ever a world where that is acceptable? I struggle with it. But what do you think? 0344 499 1000. That and so much more still to come. It's The Late Show here on Talk. It's Phil Dave in for Petrie, Hosken. And I very much hope you'll stick with me until 1 o'clock tomorrow morning because, well, I'm going to be here, so you might as well be soon. See you after this.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk. A very good evening to you. It's Phil Dave in for Petrie Hosken with you until 1 o'clock tomorrow morning here on the home of common sense. Message has come through on WhatsApp from Brian on 0344 499 1000. Says, evening Phil, I'm sure these quote-unquote lily-livered left-wing youngsters would fight if they didn't want to see their mothers and sisters attacked. I'm going to use the word attacked because it's a bit strong wording what you've used. By the invading army is the way he puts it. Brian, I totally understand what you say, and I do agree that there are indeed some people who are, without a shadow of a doubt, invading this country. And, oh, OK, do you know what? I mustn't beat about the bush, and I'm not going to edit you. We are the home of free speech. You're quite right. You say raping. So I completely agree that there are certain individuals who do invade this country and do indeed sexually attack women in this country. But I hate to say it, I'm not entirely sure that I believe that that would be enough to encourage some people to actually go out and fight. Because you know what? I just believe that some people are so brainwashed into hating this country and to believe that those who wish us the most harm are actually the victims. I don't think they would. You only have to look at what's going on in the Middle East at the moment to know how brainwashed and stupid people are when it comes to that. 0344 499 1000. He also goes on to say, how do I complain to the authorities about this advertisement for Muslim-only applicants? If it was whites only, all hell would break loose. Got to admit, that's definitely what goes through my mind as well, is how? How is it even possible to justify a world where you say that someone need only apply if they follow a certain religious criteria? Because there's no doubt in my mind that, as you say, Brian, if anyone said whites only or Christians only, there would be, I'd say quite rightly, hell to pay. But apparently it doesn't matter for some communities. 0344 499 1000. This is from Danny on WhatsApp, who says, I served in Northern Ireland twice, Bosnia twice, Iraq twice, and Afghanistan twice. I don't recognise the country, and there is no chance of me going back to war to fight for a country that just persecutes its soldiers and its own people for having an opinion. I would fight against this abhorrent government if the people rose up. Goodness me. Well, there is quite the message, isn't there? And you know what, Danny? I don't blame you. I really don't, because I'm not entirely sure that I would be in the least bit tempted to fight if I thought I was fighting for this government. But where I've said all along, and what I've said all along, is that I believe that I would be fighting for how good this country could be again. And that's what I think we need to cling on to. 0344 499 1000. Ken in London has called that number. Ken, would you fight for this country?
No, I'm 80 years old now.
Oh.
But if I was younger, I would have to be very serious. I wouldn't fight anywhere. I would go on the first aid squad, look after the wounded. I'm a Christian, I wouldn't be involved in killing somebody else, but I would certainly go on to help those who are fighting.
Well, it's just as important to be in the medical corps, let's be honest. You know, we've got to say that it's important to keep those troops going, and someone has to do it. But Ken...
I would go in the medical corps if necessary, but Phil, I'm very, very disappointed with the political scene in this country lately.
I suspect you're not the only one.
I think one of the most important things in a person's character is to be truthful. Now, I've told lies. I am not a perfect person. We can all tell lies. Most of us would say we've told some lies sometimes in our life as young boys, young girls. And sometimes we can just tell a half lie. I'm guilty, the same as everybody else. But what I see developing in this country over the past, say, maybe 15, 20 years, is lying is now institutionalized and accepted in the political realm, even at the cabinet, even at the House of Commons.
Well, you say even at the House of Commons. Some might say especially in the House of Commons. But yes,
that's a better word. Especially is a better word. Especially because the people and the MPs, the cabinet office, then up to the Prime Minister, male or female, set an example for the country. And around the Houses of Parliament, carved in stone, is the Lord's Prayer. It's carved in stone below the bottom window in French Norman. The Houses of Parliament was established on Christian belief in Jesus Christ. And when a person becomes an MP, it used to be you had to swear on the Bible. Now they can swear on the Quran, etc.
Don't get me started on that, but yes.
But I watched this today, and I've watched it intently for the past few weeks, what's happening with the situation in our land. And I see, for example, in the Prime Minister's questions, the opposition leader asks a question, it is never answered by the Prime Minister. It is never answered. It's a disgrace. The people want to hear that.
Always deflects, doesn't he?
Deflected.
Always. Just doesn't want to answer any question. I don't even know why we bother having PMQs anymore. There's no point.
I was just thinking that, and even the questions which are asked, I think they've got a prepared answer. They must know the questions before the question is asked.
Oh, yeah, they do. They totally do. That absolutely is a thing. Yes, they do.
That's false. That is totally false.
I agree. Completely. And I have always thought that. I've always thought it's absolutely bizarre. Because at the very least, you know what? If someone was to ask a question to the Prime Minister that's completely off the cuff, and the Prime Minister didn't know about it beforehand, and said it was something, I don't know, something maybe statistic-based or something like that, and if at the very least the Prime Minister had to turn around and say, do you know what, I don't have those numbers to hand, I'm very happy to go and find out and sort of maybe answer next week's, whatever, I'd find that more acceptable than trying to bluff your way out of it or just bluster through.
Well, that is what really upset me. I'm a Christian, and not to point the finger at others, but when the leader of the country is setting an example for lying and evading questions, we have to speak up about it. Now, for today, for example, he came on and he said that nobody had put pressure under Sir Ollie. But Sir Ollie had specifically declared in his testimony that they were under tremendous pressure from Downing Street. And anything that's coming from Downing Street comes with the authority of the Prime Minister. That was a deliberate lie, and I think he's going to be caught out on that. I watched GB News, and they're speaking about it. Very interesting. But I'm not trying to bring this man down as a person, but he is the leader of our country, and when the young people look at that, they say, well, if they people can lie, why should I tell the truth? And the Bible tells us clearly that liars go to the lake of fire unless we repent and believe in Jesus Christ. And we're all guilty. I'm not saying I'm not guilty, but this is a continuous institutionalized development now in our land and accepted. Now, there are many honest MPs. I'm not pointing the finger at every MP, but we need to see people in leadership of this country with an honest character. That is why politics...
Well, it would be nice, but I don't think it exists. Well, at least I haven't seen it exist anyway.
I'll tell you how it could happen. There are quite a number of born-again Christians in the Houses of Parliament, and I'm looking for some of these men or women to stand up and to say, at the risk of their job, at the risk of being popular, to say the problem in the United Kingdom now is this: we have turned away from our Christian traditions. We have now rejected what the Bible says, and we make a mockery of God when we ask people to swear on the Bible when they become an MP into the Houses of Parliament. That's a total mockery of the Bible. How this could be improved is one of these MPs stood up and says, listen, my dear fellow political party people, we all need to repent of our unbelief in Jesus Christ and get back to the Bible, and God will bless the country. Until we do that, we will continue to go down in a filthy spiral of lies, unbelief, and perversion.
Ken, thank you very much indeed for your call. It's always much appreciated to hear your thoughts. 03444991000 if you would like to join in the conversation. Lies, and more lies. That seems to be the nature of the game. Right, okay. Well, I tell you one other story that I do want to have a quick chat with you about, and I'd love to get your reaction as well. imagine this, if you will, no non-believers allowed. So this is a shocking investigation that has exposed what can only be described as a shadow rental market in the heart of London, where landlords are basically illegally slamming the door on anyone who doesn't share their faith. So this is from Barking to Walthamstow. Dozens of ads are apparently appearing on social media with a clear and defiant message: Muslims only. It is a blatant breach of the Equality Act and, frankly, a middle finger to law. And, according to critics, a disgusting example of modern-day segregation. Now, while the portals scramble to delete the evidence, the landlords themselves are telling non-Muslim applicants to go away. So is London becoming a city of gated communities based on religion? And frankly, I'm surprised there's not more of an outrage over this. But how do you feel about this? Because here is where I sit. I personally believe that it depends what the motivation is. Now, if I thought for a second that someone was saying, actually, we're capable or able to cater for someone who has certain religious beliefs and maybe require something. So I can certainly relate it, say, to the Jewish community, where I know that religious Jewish people have to have two sort of areas in the kitchen where they keep dairy products and meat-based products totally separate. So if you were to say that you cater for someone who has a particular religious belief, then I could almost understand it. But to categorically state that you only want tenets of a certain religion, well, then I'm sorry, but in this country that is illegal. That is called discrimination, and discrimination is not allowed. So how on earth is this any more acceptable than someone turning around and saying, well, I don't mind who rents my flat as long as they're Christian or as long as they're white? Could you just imagine the outcry? And frankly, I would say I agree. There should be an outcry if that is the case. But I just don't understand how this has been allowed to happen clearly for some time. This can't be a new thing, because you know what? If there was, say, a handful of people who were doing this, let's just say there are only, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 landlords out there who had decided that they were going to be selective based on race and religion, well, then I could understand it sort of slipping through the net. But the fact that the Telegraph have managed to do a whole investigation on this must be pretty endemic. There must be a great number of people doing this and thinking it's remotely acceptable. So my question is, why aren't the authorities stamping down on this? Because in exactly the same way that anyone who tried to discriminate against any minority, but I think there are several people who believe that if they say something against fundamentalism, fundamentalist Islam, they feel like they're being persecuted probably slightly more than others if they were to sort of highlight the differences, for want of a better term. I've got to pick my words so carefully here. Highlight the differences, if you like, of a minority. Then they feel like they would be persecuted for that, and they would be punished accordingly. So why doesn't it go both ways? In exactly the same way that I would expect any landlord who discriminates against me for being Jewish, for example, discriminates against you for being whatever religion you are. Why on earth is this remotely acceptable? 0344 499 1000. Join in the conversation. Come on, you know, I can speak to myself if you want, but I'd love to hear from you if you do want to join in. Tell me what you think. Maybe I am being unfair. Maybe I'm reading this all wrong. Maybe I'm just looking into something that frankly doesn't exist. But I don't think I am. I think I've read this very clearly. You know, if you're watching, you can see very clearly an example of the post on social media that we're talking about. And frankly, I think it's all there in black and white. I think it spells it out very clearly. They're saying Muslims only. How is that okay? Because I certainly don't think it is. But I wouldn't think it was okay for, to tell you the truth, anyone. 0344 499 1000. Of course, the other story we're talking about is the debacle that's going on in the world of Westminster, and Robert in Hertfordshire has called about that. Robert, a very good evening to you.
Yeah, very good evening. What we're looking at is a blatant case of racism. Now, if it was the other way round, or if the left wing and certain or Muslims are very quick to call ordinary people racist, this is racism. You know, this is.
I agree. And Robert, racism is illegal, quite rightly.
Well, it's two-tier, isn't it?
Well, it certainly feels like it could be two-tier.
You know, but my question is, what are they going to do about it? Are they going to prosecute the people who are advertising? Because they should be prosecuted.
Well, I would have thought so. But then, how can I say that it looks like that it's somehow okay? And apart, the other question as well is, I mentioned 3 social media sites before, or 3 sites of some description. I think it was Facebook, Gumtree, and Telegram. Why have they got that content on there? Now, I understand, by the way, before anyone starts saying anything, I fully appreciate it's not possible for all of these sites to vet absolutely everything. But I would have thought that there are certain key words that they could go looking for and know that there must be something not quite right if it is indeed featuring in a post.
Well, the thing is as well, it's just illustrating the fact that whether we like it or not, we are in the middle of a holy war. Now, you just spoke to Ken, who's a committed Christian, and we are in the middle of Islam trying to take over. I don't think that the ordinary peace-loving Muslim is speaking out enough. They don't seem to speak out against the radicals, and I feel that we have been. They're shutting down churches and turning them into mosques, for God's sake.
Well, quite. I mean, I dare say there are plenty of people, Robert, who do feel very strongly about that. And look, I think, as you rightly identify, it's very hard to talk about this without muddling up peace-loving Muslims and those who clearly want to assimilate into British life. But it's very difficult when you see that there are those individuals out there who clearly disregard our Christian values in this country. I'm not even Christian, and I'm saying that. 0344 499 1000. Join in the conversation and have your say. Right, coming up in just a moment, we'll be going through Thursday's front pages in the company of the marvellous Howard Cox. Don't go anywhere.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good evening to you, or a very good morning, depending on what time of day you're listening to this. This is indeed the Paper Review Hour here on Talk with Phil Dave in for Petrie Hosken. Coming up in the next hour, we'll be going through the front pages for Thursday, the 23rd of April, and I'll be doing that in the rather splendid company of the founder of Fairfuel UK, Howard Cox, who joins me in the studio. Greetings, Howard. How are you doing?
I'm fine, Phil. Thank you for having me on.
Excellent. Well, it was a great pleasure, and I'm afraid that you've got to tolerate me for a whole hour. I can only apologise for that.
It's a sheer pleasure, my good friend.
Well, likewise. But, Howard, there are, apart from all the front pages, which we will go through in just a moment, there are many things that we need to cover, and I think that it would be somewhat silly not to talk about the fuel crisis that is facing this country at the moment, seeing as this is your forte, Albin. I would suggest that it seems silly not to mention that there are so many countries around the world that recognise that fuel is in a bit of a pickle at the moment, and that's putting it very mildly. But yet those countries have been able to help their citizens, and yet our government don't seem so willing to do so.
Yeah, it's a sad situation. There's about 67 countries that Fairfuel UK is monitoring, ranging from actually cutting fuel duty to actually taking the VAT off fuel duty or the whole fill-up, etc., and also capping the number of times that they can put up prices in the forecourts per day. They are making some decent action. Italy have cut fuel duty by 30%. Spain have put £5 billion into supporting motorists in a package. But here, Rachel Reeves, this government, are hell-bent still on their increase of 5p in the autumn budget, reversing Rishi Sunak's 2022 cut.
Well, this must be Christmas come early to them, because let's be honest, if less and less people can use fuel-based vehicles, well, then Ed Miliband gets one step nearer to his dream of net zero.
Well, up until then, I was really pleased to be here, but you mentioned Ed Miliband.
No, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I need an antiemetic to continue with him. Yeah, I mean, the problem is what we're seeing is that she's wallowing in an extra £230 million of VAT that's come in since the beginning of March. That's 6, 7, 8 weeks. That sort of time. And the poor old driver, and let's talk about the white van man, or sorry, I should white van woman, of course, there's lots of them about. They're actually paying an extra £1.3 billion since the beginning of March, over and above what they paid this time last year. This is impacting the economy, and of course March came up with the inflation rates we just heard them. It's gone up to 3.3%, missing the target of going to 2% by a country mile.
It just seems so unbelievable, the way that every which way one can possibly think of that would benefit, would help, would encourage either British citizens or indeed the UK economy. And at surface value, it looks like this government just do completely the opposite.
Well, obviously, they just take. They tax and tax. Of the G7 countries, we're now the highest taxed of them completely. We're getting to a situation where unemployment and all these things, jobs are being threatened by this situation. And frankly, Phil, I mean, when we look at this, our politicians are clueless about transport. It is the commercial and social heartbeat of our economy, and we need it. And I just don't understand why they don't get it. If they put more money into people's pockets, that means cutting fuel costs and social, and businesses, and putting it into their wallets as well. We would actually have more dynamic economy. They want growth, they talk growth, and all they do is stifling it.
I want to get your thoughts as well, Howard, on a couple of stories that we are talking about on this show. And that is about, well, look, we know that London has something in the way of a booming rental market, and the law very clearly states that the door must be open to absolutely everyone. But there's a new investigation that has revealed what one might describe as something in the way of a shadow market, where actually the rules of the Equality Act apparently don't apply. So across Facebook, Gumtree, and I think Telegram is the other, landlords are illegally slamming the proverbial door in the face of thousands because they're advertising for Muslims only rentals and explicitly filtering out tenants by religion, race or nationality. Now, I'm sorry, but what on earth happened to enforcing the Equalities Act? As far as I'm concerned, racism is illegal where I come from.
Well, that is purely racist, as you quite rightly put. I mean, in terms of the Equalities Act, I don't think we've ever had one that really operates fairly anyway. But it doesn't matter what race, whether it's Muslims, Hindu, Jews or whatever. At the end of the day, this looks as though it's going back to the dark ages when, you know, it's whites only and no Irish and no Jews and no dogs and things like that. Those are the sorts of things that were happening before. And I'm amazed how this has actually got through. I saw in a particular interview earlier before I came here, and this particular person, he happened to be a specialist Muslim lawyer, saying that this is not true. I mean, you're not getting it right. Gumtree, he went on to Gumtree and couldn't find any source of this particular adverts where it says Muslim.
Well, I'm not surprised, is because a lot of the perpetrators tried to delete these messages now because they know the game's up.
Well, the Telegraph, I think it's an exclusive with the Telegraph. They've shown this to be true, and I'm afraid yet again, you know, we're in a situation whereby diversity is supposed to be the success of this country, and I sound like Sadiq Khan, don't I? But
Please don't.
But exactly. Frankly, what's happening at the moment is that the white person in this country is the one that's is being prejudiced against.
Well, it certainly would appear to be that way to some people. I hope not everyone, but absolutely, I know exactly what you mean. You know, the other thing I was thinking of as well is, I guess it depends what one's motivation for doing this is. And I made a point saying that earlier on, if it's to say that you're able to cater for certain individuals' religious beliefs, and I use the example of saying that there are some religious Jewish people who require, in some extreme cases, would you believe, 2 kitchens because they keep meat products and dairy products totally separate. And so for that, they require 2 of everything. And then if you were to say that you cater for religious beliefs and religious needs, I think that is incredibly different to actually posting categorically stating you only want people of a particular religion to apply. And I can't help but think the outrage and the outcry there would be if there was an advert that said whites only.
Well, you're absolutely right. And as you say, it's going back 50 years when that was quite a regular occurrence. But the point is, there's no harm in saying we take animals, we take dogs. That's positive. You know, we're open to all, in other words. But I'm afraid this, you know, even the 2 kitchens thing you painted, you know, I think it's quite a nice thing to suggest. But again, if you've got 2 kitchens, great, you're lucky to have it. I mean, you might have to pay a lot of rent for that, I would have thought.
Well, either that or you'd have to go through twice the amount of dishwasher salt. But let's have a look at this message that's come in here. It says, this cannot be real. What about the GP that was fired because of the burqa debacle? And it's from about 5 days ago. Sorry, I'm just probably proofreading this live on air, which is never a good thing. And okay, right. So the rest of that I don't need to read out. But absolutely. So this particular individual who does remain anonymous, about saying quite rightly this GP that was struck off because they asked a patient to remove a burqa. And the other example that I've not heard come up, and I may have missed it, but I'm slightly surprised no one has said anything, especially when we're talking about social media, of course, is Lucy Connolly. Now, don't get me wrong, Lucy Connolly should not have said what she said, and indeed she paid the price for it. But at the same time, that's just the point. She shouldn't have said what she said, but these individuals shouldn't be stipulating that they want Muslims only, and yet they're not being thrown in prison.
Absolutely right. I mean, I'm the tender age of 71 years of age. What's going on now?
To which I say impossible.
Well, thank you. It's very kind. I'll pay you later.
I would have said at least 75.
No, don't go there. Yeah, but you're absolutely right. I mean, the Lucy Connolly thing is particularly poignant. Yes, it was a daft post, etc. But to get, you know, in prison for 30 months, I think it was. She didn't serve that, but the point is she was given that, and she was given bad advice as well by the House solicitor she was forced upon. Did you do this post? She said yes. And going back to the whole issue of actually what we can and can't do and can't say, surely if they want to actually get this whole message across that we're diverse, we accept everyone, you don't actually put in a label that says Muslims only, because you're going back against what you just preached.
Well, as I say, I think there would be quite rightly outrage if that was the case, based on other religions stipulating no whoever, but only Christians or only Jews or anything. Let's have a look at this story here. The government's top legal advisor has been caught up in a bit of a crossfire at the moment. One Lord Hermer, of course, he's the Attorney General. He and, of course, being a key ally of Sir Keir Starmer, let's not forget, has been accused of leading this relentless witch hunt against British war heroes. And this is, of course, despite being warned that the allegations of murder and torture were absolute lies. So for a decade, decorated soldiers were dragged through hell and accused of atrocities in Iraq by claimants who, by the way, were not innocent farmers, but funnily enough, members of an Iranian-backed insurgent group. And emails have revealed that Hermer was told that the claims were nonsense and implausible as far back as 2008, and yet reportedly pressed for massive taxpayer-funded payouts anyway. So in spite of being told this is nonsense, he still pressed for the payouts. And of course, veterans are quite rightly now calling for his resignation, but personally, I just think try him for treason. It's the only thing I can think of. I find it despicable, truly.
Well, I don't know what's between the ears of Lord Hermer. There can't be much. He's got an amoebic brain, as far as I'm concerned. He's only got one cell, and that one cell is actually
broken.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's terrible. As you say, the troops were totally exonerated. The people that they were accused of, torturing, I think it was in Iraq, and local people, etc. But they found out actually it was the other people, local farmers and local indigenous people that were doing the torturing, and they were dressed up, I heard.
And can we also state the blooming obvious, that those troops were only following Labour orders?
Yes, it's an interesting point. I didn't see it that way, but you're absolutely right. The point is they were innocent. They were totally exonerated. There's nothing to do with this, and they were actually defending or fighting on our behalf. And yet Hermer, what's he done? What's he delivered to this country? What's he contributed to the benefit of our society? Except...
well, I think he's contributed is damage to the armed forces' reputation, to tell you the truth.
And I think you're right about the treason thing, but don't forget, there's quite a few politicians at the moment that should be actually put in my opinion, against the wall, and we should be shooting them.
Well,
I feel that strongly about what I see today. It beggars belief. There's not one politician I respect that sits in Westminster anymore, and I've been campaigning public affairs and this for nearly 30 years.
I think I struggle to argue with that, to tell you the truth. Right, shall we start going through some of the front pages? Let's have a look at the front page of The Sun for Thursday morning.
Right.
And, by the way, may I say, if you are listening on a Thursday, a very happy St George's Day. But let's see this. Telecom giants stark warning, Brits facing mobile signal rationing as energy costs soar over Iran conflict. So, phony war is their headline. Let's see what they did there. Millions of phone users face having data rationed or being hit by surge pricing at peak times after the Iran war sent energy costs soaring. So mobile giants were left out of a government discount scheme that reduced costs for businesses. Insiders say the exclusion is a serious oversight, and with energy prices soaring, firms warn that they may slow speeds or make people pay more at peak times. I mean, I'm sorry. Phone companies are not poor. Maybe just take the hit for a couple of weeks, couple of months.
Well, it's the understatement. Of course they're not poor. They're very, very profitable. I don't think there's any mobile company that actually has lost money. I follow some of this stuff. But this is technology that we've got now, the AI stuff and everything. The whole processing power, the whole storage issue costs money. And, of course, that money has to be spent on a huge amount of energy that supplies these massive pieces of kit that actually hold our information and run our services. You're absolutely right. I don't know what the detail is. I've read this today. I've just got the front page. And frankly, it beggars belief yet again we're in a situation where who's going to be paying for this but the good old consumer.
And I also despise the way that it is just too easy for companies and officials to just pass the buck onto the everyday, hard-working, tax-paying person. It's just too simple for them to turn around and say, oh, we don't want to dent our profits. Oh, I know what we do. You pay instead.
Well, welcome to the world where I've been campaigning against. You got petrol, diesel. I mean, fuel duty is a regressive tax, and it hits the poorest the hardest. And this is the point. people need their phones nowadays, especially in places like London, where, you know, walking down the street at night, or, you know, where there's no police in sight, you need your phone, you need a good mobile signal. And that's an interesting point, actually. I hope the money they get for this, and you know, the extra money they're charging for, actually gives us a better signal, because I'll tell you what, the signals right across the country, you know, are not consistent. You just try being on a train, you know.
It is completely extraordinary how, in a day and age of modern technology, and we still can't master mobile phone signals.
It's ridiculous. I know. We've got this thing called 5G, and, you know, we've got people fighting against 6G because they think it can cause cancer, etc. At the end of the day, you know, we need to have communication to help out, well, not only commercially and socially, but for our safety.
But it's the day and age in which we live anyway. Communication is king, let's be honest, whether we like it or not. 0344 499 1000, by the way, if you'd like to share your thoughts on any of the stories that we are covering. It's the pay-per-view hour here on Talk. Howard Cox joins me, Phil Dave, in for Petrie Hosken, and we're with you for at least the next 45 minutes, doing more papers in just a moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is the pay-per-view hour here on Talk with Phil Dave in for Petrie Hosken. I'm joined by Howard Cox, who of course is the founder of Fair Fuel UK. Howard, let's turn our attention to the front page of the Times, shall we? Because the Times leads with PM should face sleaze inquiry over Mandelson. Starmer under pressure from ministers and MPs. Opposition parties are urging the Commons Speaker to refer Sir Keir Starmer to an official parliamentary sleaze inquiry after claims that he misled MPs over the Mandelson scandal. I just would love to know what we don't know. I can't help but think, if we know what we do know, then what don't we know? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the issue with this particular thing is actually he didn't answer Kemi Badenoch's question accurately. He
doesn't answer any question from Kemi Badenoch accurately.
Well, he hasn't done since he's been in power. He's
never. Always deflects.
And he gets up and throws his rattle out the pram with Lindsay Hoyle. He goes up and slams his seat and says, you know, why are you talking to me like that, and etc. Please answer the questions is what he's supposed to do. It's clues in the title, Prime Minister's Questions. Yeah, the thing is, you know, this whole thing about it, I mean, he apparently said there was no pressure on Sir Ollie Robbins. And Sir Ollie Robbins...
Sir Ollie Robbins says otherwise.
Exactly. I mean... And
to be honest with you, even if he says, right, there was no pressure applied to Sir Ollie Robbins, I would have thought that, given how this government and successive governments have been incredibly good at allowing people to define what is right and wrong by their feelings alone, if Sir Ollie Robbins believes that he was put under pressure, well, then surely there must be something to legitimise that, because that's how he felt.
Exactly. I mean, the point is with Sir Ollie Robbins, he's just been treated terribly. I cannot believe it. I'm not necessarily a fan of him. He's very much... I'm
going to say, I'm not going to pretend to feel too sorry for him. But
but he wasn't giving any chance to actually defend himself. who's just got basically the phone call, you're sacked.
Well, I was reading one thing that suggested actually that Starmer tried to get rid of him before he had the chance to even say what was going on. But anyway, that's the front page of the Times with that story. I think we've covered that quite a lot, so let's look at some of the other stories. This one here on the front page of the Times: France must reduce migrant crossings to earn share of £110 million. Yes, you heard me, a share of £110 million. Britain and France have agreed that the terms of a new deal to stop small boat crossings that will link payments to results for the first time and involve riot police being stationed on the French coast. Now, got to give credit where it's due. Hallelujah, that sounds a little bit more sensible to me. Shabana Mahmood, of course the Home Secretary, will travel to Dunkirk to sign a 3-year £660 million agreement that will expire in March 2029, weeks before the next general election is due. Well, some might say it's a cunning move. But
this is a couple of the front pages. You pick the Times, but I think the Express has got one. It says, here's another 660 million to stop the boats. Another. You made a point about 110 million. The only thing good about this I see in the small print, if you go down to it, it's based on actually, if I read it properly, the funding will be conditional on results.
Which, to my mind, sounds considerably more sensible than the current agreement, which is here is basically a blank cheque, now stop the boats. Whereas actually, if you incentivise and say, well, no, if you want to earn this money, we'll pay you based on how many you do stop. Now, that to me sounds a bit more like it. Exactly the same way, by the way, I've always thought that that is how the benefit system should work, is that if you want people to live a life on benefits, then you have to incentivise them to actually do it. So if they could, I know that there are some incentives in place, like such as actively seeking work, and you have to sort of get certain point schemes and stuff like that ticked off to prove that you are actively looking for work if you're on job seekers. But there are plenty of examples where actually we should be trying to reward success rather than just say, oh, well, regardless, you're going to get paid, so it doesn't really matter.
Well, I don't think many politicians understand the word incentivise. And we're in a situation, that this money is front-loaded, by the way, to pay for helicopters, another, I think it's 1,000 police, 1,100 police going in there. All over there, we're paying for it, we're funding it. It's not coming from Macron's budget. I just don't...
Well, Macron doesn't care. Why would he? As long as as far as he's concerned, they're all leaving the French shores anyway, so it doesn't matter.
I know, but equally, they're not doing the job, are they? How many times have we seen pictures of the police just standing by, almost waving them off? Have a good trip.
Yeah, totally. I think they help them into the boats sometimes.
Exactly. The occasional standing ice used on, I think, 1 in 100 boats, but at the end of the day, we are just, our taxpayers here, we are paying really to try and stop this incredible influx, our invasion of these people, and yet...
I'm pleased you use the word invasion. I've said it for a long time, and that's exactly what it is, an invasion.
Yeah, I'm on Sir Jim Ratcliffe thing. I think we're being colonised.
Totally and utterly. And not only that, if you think of it this way, not only are we paying in France to stop the boats, then that doesn't even scratch the surface as to how much we're paying when these cretinous individuals actually get over here.
Yeah, and that's the issue, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse. And I don't understand. I mean, it's funny, really. As you know, I've been fighting for the motorists for years and years. I'm trying
Have
to.
You?
One of the things I'm trying to do is actually relaunch our all-party parliamentary group, which for 14 years the Tories, obviously. And we had a few Labour people on it, but at the moment, the Labour Party, and this is exclusive to you, Phil, that have been whipped not to join the motorist My Fairfield UK all-party parliamentary group. The Lewis Cocking, the MP for Braintree, or is it Broxbourne? Sorry, he's the guy trying to do this for me. And fundamentally, the whips have told them not to help the motorists. That's what they're saying. And I'll be putting out a press release to this shortly. You cannot believe what these people are doing.
Well, Andre Walker always recalls a story when he was involved with London Assembly and talking about how at the time when they were discussing putting in a bus lane on the North Circular, I think this sums up everything, and the review apparently or the consultation on that potential to put in a bus lane on the North Circular came back as saying that this would seriously impact the flow of traffic on the North Circle if you were to put in a bus lane. And apparently one of the officials who'd read it said, yeah, but that's not actually the only benefit. They see it as a benefit to encroach the lives of motorists. It's not a benefit at all. It's absolutely horrendous. And anyone who is unfortunate enough to have to use the North Circular will know that, if anything, there needs to be an additional lane, not taking away one of the lanes for the privilege of the few buses that drive up and down it.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, we are being priced off the roads and, you know, into a 15-minute city environment. That's the other thing that you've got. We are being totally controlled, and that's the aim of it. It's not even being hidden anymore. We are being controlled.
Good luck with trying to control me. Front page of the Times, sick of your high-flying older siblings, blame germs. Having an older sibling can be a mixed blessing. You may have a ready-made playmate, but younger brothers and sisters must get used to hand-me-downs. They have to put up with sharing toys and the attention of their parents. If that wasn't enough, they also tend to do worse than their older siblings in intelligence test exam results and earnings later in life. Apparently, researchers have long debated why this might be. An economics paper has apparently offered an explanation that involves childhood germs. Do you have any siblings?
Yeah, I've got 3 older brothers. I'm the baby. I'm the baby of the family.
Yeah.
But, and I totally agree with this. This is why I was always sick and terrible. I couldn't go to school. No, joking apart, what a load of tosh yet again. You know, where's this coming from? I'm surprised this is, the science editor is on the front page of the Times.
I'm actually slightly surprised it's front page of the Times. Well.
Yeah.
Come on, Times, you can do better than that.
Exactly. Daily
Express front page. Here's another, as you've already alluded to, here's another £660 million to stop the boats. And also on the front page of the Daily Express is a picture of His Majesty amazing Charles's delight at his green blue Peter badge. I do find it slightly frustrating when people are so over-familiar that they refer to the King or His Majesty by his first name. Front page of the Daily Mirror, and it says Knox's letter to Letby cleared of Meredith murder, now reaching out to jailed baby killer. Amanda Knox has written to jailed Lucy Letby as she researches the twisted nurse who murdered 7 babies for a new podcast. The American, who's 38, who was jailed and later cleared over the 2007 murder of the 21-year-old British student Meredith Kircher. Goodness me, 2007. I remember it like it was yesterday. Gracious me. Made the revelation at a London screening of her new documentary. I do worry about high-profile cases, because I don't know. Obviously, Letby clearly has been convicted, and one shouldn't argue with that until she's cleared otherwise, if indeed it is possible to clear her. Maybe that she absolutely is guilty, and in which case, well, then may she rot. But I do find it slightly disconcerting of all these high-profile cases, just how many are influenced by the public attention.
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying this is the case with Letby, but clearly it was the case with Amanda Knox.
Well, exactly, and I think Amanda Knox is a little bit of an opportunist in this situation. Obviously, she's got in this situation. She was found innocent. I got no problem with that. Letby, apparently, it's 50-50 situation. David Davis, the MP, he's actually a big person. Thinks she's a big name who believes she's totally innocent. And there is some questions to be answered. I've seen various documentaries and, I've read lots of articles about this, and I'm thinking, hey, this particular prosecution isn't safe. And but if she did what she did, you're quite right. She should rot in jail.
0344 499 1000 is the number if you want to get involved in any of the conversations that we are having. Obviously, don't interact if you are listening to this again at 5 o'clock in the morning, because this is a repeat of the programme. Howard Cox, founder of Fair Fuel, is joining me, Phil Dave, to go through Thursday's front pages. We'll continue doing so right after this. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is the pay-per-view hour here on Talk. It's Phil Dave in for Petrie Hosken, and I'm joined by Howard Cox, who of course is the founder of Fair Fuel UK. Howard, we got up to the front page, oh joy, of The Guardian. Right, rubber gloves at the ready. And their front page leads with PM isolated as cabinet divisions emerge over Mandelson's scandal. Good gracious me, you could almost be forgiven for thinking The Guardian and turning on the Labour Party. Goodness me. But also on the front page, doubts over peace talks as Iran seizes 2 ships. Well, you see, here's the thing, Guardian. You're quite right. There are doubts over peace talks because of the way Iran is behaving. Yes, that's right, Iran. So don't go blaming America or any of your usual nonsense. You can blame the way that the Iranian regime is behaving as to the doubts of peace. You can't make peace with people who don't believe in it. It's not really rocket science, no pun intended. Iranian forces have seized 2 ships in the Strait of Hormuz as the US and Iran double down on separate blockades of the shipping waterway that have choked the energy markets. The standoff over the narrow waterway through which about 20% of the world's oil and liquefied natural gases pass through during peacetime. They raised doubts about whether stalled peace negotiations would resume. Well, and then it goes on to quote the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament. Well, do you know what? Quote the President of the US, I dare you. Go on. Pretend you're a Western newspaper. There's an idea. People certainly in certain power, particularly, Rachel Reeves keeps blaming this is Donald Trump's war. It's nothing to do with us, and this is why, of course, inflation has gone up. All those sorts of things. Everything's to blame Donald Trump and what he's doing, but people forget about what happened in Iran. It was 40,000 people just killed. Purely because they didn't agree with their government.
Exactly. And I think people should cherish the fact that in America and here we still live in a democracy, even though this country is becoming
Could have fooled me.
Yeah, exactly, Phil. I know what you're saying there, but at the end of the day, you and I are talking about this issue and attacking the government about various issues.
True.
If you did that in China, Iran, or Russia, you'd be shot. So, or hung or whatever. So, but this thing here, I am worried about the seizures of 2 ships. But you made the point, I think it says in there, about 20% of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas passes through that. That makes the point that 80% is still okay. There's no panic. The supply of fuel in our country is fine. It's not a problem whatsoever. But that 20%, most of that 20% is jet fuel. And that is going to be a problem. And I see that fuel for aeroplanes will be rationed shortly.
I just want to go on to read this quote. I'm not going to bother reading the name of this individual because it doesn't mean anything to most normal people. But the quote of the Iranian parliamentarian said that the reopening of the strait would be impossible while the US and Israel committed flagrant breaches of the ceasefire, including the US naval blockade, the hostage-taking of the world's economy, and Zionist warmongering. Well, no, it's not Zionist warmongering. I tell you what it is. It is people who are Zionists, me being one of them, by the way, very proudly, people who are Zionists who recognise what a dreadful threat to peace the Iranian regime is. And frankly, shame on The Guardian for thinking that that is the person you need to quote. And until the Western media, all of the Western media, gets their nasty little polluted heads around the fact that actually Israel and America are not the bad guys in all of this, and that the vile Iranian regime are, maybe we're never going to get this little problem sorted. Also on the front page of The Guardian, cancer diagnosis every 80 seconds across the UK. My goodness me, the number of people in the UK being diagnosed with cancer has reached a record high, with 1 diagnosis every 80 seconds, a report reveals. Blimey, that is scary.
Yeah, but the technology behind it is detecting it. There's certain cancers 20 years ago they wouldn't be able to detect. So that's a double-edged sword. It's worrying that people are getting more people are finding out they've got cancer, but equally there's more chance of them getting cured.
True, and I do also recognise that the number of people who sort of say that more and more people are getting cancer now, I just think there's many different factors at play here. There's more awareness, there's more, as you say, availability of medical treatment and indeed services to diagnostics, that's the word, diagnostics to detect cancers in the first place, whereas in years gone by, people were, in inverted commas, dying of old age, where actually they might not have been dying of old age. They might have been dying of cancer without us even realising.
Well, that's the point. I totally agree with that one. And the other thing we spoke about earlier about energy, etc., and the amount of energy to actually run these machines, these incredible pieces of diagnostic kit. I mean, I'm having an MRI next week because I've got a spinal problem, and you know, that sort of thing. And these great big MRI machines use amazing amounts of power, and that sort of thing. But we are in a modern age. Technology is helping us, and we should cherish it.
Amen to that. Front page of the Daily Telegraph. As you might expect, we referred to this earlier. Herma pursued witch hunt against troops despite warnings. Attorney General ignored concerns that Iraqi war crime allegations were false as he worked on case against soldiers. Lord Herma pursued a notorious witch hunt against British troops despite being warned the allegations were lies, the Telegraph can disclose. That's their front page for Thursday. Also on the front page of the Telegraph, it's over. Cabinet turns on Starmer over Mandelson scandal. Cabinet loyalists have turned on Sir Keir Starmer in a growing backlash over his handling of the Mandelson scandal. The Prime Minister is facing a rebellion from his closest allies, including Rachel Reeves, after he sacked the head of the Foreign Office over the disgraced peers vetting. I think we've covered that quite a lot already. Now, one of the other stories on the front page of the Daily Telegraph is in one of the tiny little boxes at the bottom, but it's an interesting one all the same. Ditch passwords, for a pass key, say experts. So people should stop using passwords online. The UK's cyber agency is to warn. The National Cyber Security Centre, which is part of the intelligence agency GCHQ, said it is overhauling decades of practice by advising the public that it can no longer rely on passwords because they have become too vulnerable to hackers. I would agree with that completely. I think we are about to see the day and age of passwords disappearing, and we sort of see it already with many websites offering biometric verification. And I really think that that is the only way to go now, to guarantee something is safe, because passwords are hackable. And, you know, especially with AI now, I don't want to give anyone an idea, but I'm perfectly sure there are people out there who already have thought like this. AI could very easily be used to say, right, try all possible combinations of a password against this individual's account. This is the username. Let me know what the password is. And I could almost guarantee that it would, in seconds or minutes at the worst, come up with the answer. So I agree. We need passkey. We need biometrics.
You're absolutely right about that. The interesting thing about AI, I'm understanding, because you know we've got facial recognition now, which is supposedly a unique way of doing it. But if you've got a photograph of that person you know of and you send it to AI, that AI can be used to actually bypass facial recognition. So you're absolutely right. But don't forget, if I wanted to get into your multi-million-pound account, Phil, that you've got, you know, get into your bank account, you know, I just chop off one of your fingers and use it.
There's a lovely thought for you. We don't condone. Please don't do that. But anyway, front page of the Daily Mail. And this, I warn you, if you're of a sensitive disposition, I'm sorry what I'm about to say, but Wendy is 56 in good health, of sound mind and loved by family and friends. But tomorrow, she would take her life at a Swiss clinic. Here, in a deeply moving interview that will sharply divide opinion, she reveals why her heart is too broken to carry on. Headline: It's my life, my choice. And just to read some of this rather distressing article, the sky is a glorious blue, the cherry trees are in full bloom. It is the sort of day that makes you feel glad to be alive, isn't it, Wendy? Wendy Duff gives a little half smile. I won't change my mind, she says. I know it's hard for you. It will be hard for everyone, but I want to die. And that's what I'm going to do. And I'll have a smile on my face when I do. And so this individual, Wendy Duff, who is featured on the front page of the Daily Mail, of course it does spark the whole debate about being able to end one's life when one wants to. And part of me does say, look, yes, it's an individual's choice. It's their life. They should be allowed to do what they want to do. But nothing will stop me thinking that it's a very, very selfish act to those left behind, if indeed someone is of sound body and mind.
Well, that's the point. She obviously isn't a sound mind. She's obviously got deep depression. You can see she reveals why her heart is too broken to carry on. So something's happened, which is, I don't know, obviously later in the paper. We'll find out when we read it later. But the fact is, I think this is a very worrying situation. If I was in pain and if I was actually in a situation where I was a pain to my family, or I can understand the logic in actually saying, right, I want to make sure your life is not, I'm not a burden to you. That makes a lot of sense. But this one, I don't know. I'm looking at a picture. She looks sound decent. She looks young. I mean, does it say her
56.
age? 56.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's the top. It's staggering. And as I think you said it just now, I think it's very selfish.
But I just also, I don't know where I sit on this, because I guess I can't believe on one hand that someone has the right to do what they want to do with their life. But then on the other hand, I believe that life is sacred, and therefore that one shouldn't take it unnecessarily. And that goes in all walks of life, whether it's an individual deciding that they want to end their life, whether it is someone else deciding they're going to extinguish the life of others. Funnily enough, would you believe, ironically and possibly quite hypocritically, I am in favour of capital punishment, which I do recognise flies in the face of what I've just said. But I think that's very different, because that's more based on the fact that if someone else believes in extinguishing a life of a totally innocent person.
Phil, if the evidence is 100% certain, we've seen that. Like the guy with the Southport girls, the 3 girls.
Yeah, totally and utterly. So I think that's a very different circumstance to what we're talking about here. But in terms of this, I mean, I just feel so sorry for her family, because they must love her, and I don't think that they'd want her to be in pain or suffering, whether it's mentally or physically. Well,
she actually says, I know it's hard for you, sweetheart. It will be hard for everyone, but I want to die, and that's what I'm going to do. And I think that sums up the selfishness. But she needs... I don't know how this is going to be stopped. I mean, she's got the money to do it, and she's going to go over to, I assume, to Switzerland to have it done.
Yeah.
It's very sad.
Brian's message here, and he raises a very good point. He says, regarding Wendy, how can she be of sound mind and body when she wants to end her life? This is the thin end of the wedge.
Well, that's what we said, didn't it? There's no doubt about it. Her mind is actually certain. We've heard that cliche or that overused phrase, mental health issues. She's got a stack of them.
Front page of the Daily Star for Thursday. FIFA World Cup latest. It's brand new VAR. Refs to scan 3 Lions clones. State-of-the-art new VAR body scan tech could see footballers ruled offside by their dodgy hairdos.
I don't believe this.
In crucial World Cup matches. I'm not so sure I buy into that.
I really don't understand it, really, to be honest. If you've got a quiff or something sticking out, you could be over the line or something like that and stop a goal going in because you're offside because of your quiff.
Yeah, but I don't think for a second... Well, I mean, granted, there are 1 or 2 rather dodgy hairdos in the Premier League, but at the same time, I still don't believe for a second that this would actually cause someone to be ruled as offside.
Good old Daily Star.
Quite. Have to take it with a weeny bit of a pinch of salt. Let's just do the Financial Times, and then we'll do the last couple of pages after the next break. So, front page of the FT, Iran seizes 2 ships in show of force as bid to revive peace talks. Founders, and then also job concerns deepen after UK suffers highest tax rise on wages in rich world. That's on the front page of the FT. We'll do the final 2 pages, and we'll also talk about some of the stories that you may have missed from Wednesday's papers with Howard Cox, founder of Fair Fuel UK. This is the paper of the hour. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. It's the pay-per-view hour here on Talk with Phil Dave in for Petrie, Hosken, and I am joined by the marvellous Howard Cox, who's the founder of Fair Fuel UK. Text message here says, "Hi Dave." You can call me Phil if you'd rather. "This lady is clearly unwell mentally. Sounds like undiagnosed deep depression. No one should be allowed to take their life in these circumstances. Power of attorney should be taken by her loved ones." That's from Rachel. Thanks, Rachel. I appreciate that. And look, I dare say there are plenty of people who probably think exactly the same as you do. Let's carry on going through the front pages this Thursday morning papers, Thursday the 23rd of April. And front page of the Eye, Streeting allies now open to rein a pact with cabinet losing confidence in PM. So Keir Starmer's own cabinet are losing confidence in his leadership following Mandelson's security fiasco. Goes on to say cabinet ministers tell the Eye paper that they have lost patience with the Prime Minister and insist the entire cabinet would need to move collectively to depose him. Bleak. We need to come to a view. I know what is mine. Or what mine is, sorry. How fascinating. Thank you, Eye paper. That was very well written, not. Well, there you go. I mean, that's what the Eye is reporting. And then the front page of the Metro, finally, Workshire Brits, not this pair. Great Gran is still in full-time nursing at aged 80. Bravo. And Dad cycles 60 miles a day to earn a living. Good grief. So nurse Sylvie Hampton is... I'm going to... as the antithesis, sorry, the print here is a bit dodgy, so bear with me. The antithesis of Workshire Britain, she puts in a 60-hour shift each week at the age of 80. The Great Gran reckons she can work as hard as any 20-year-old, rarely takes days off, and said, "I feel as good as I did at 30. Bravo, Sylvie. That's what I say. That's what makes Britain great, as far as I'm concerned. That's front page of the Metro. Right, Howard, we need to have a look at some of the stories that we may have missed from Wednesday's papers, and I know that you've diligently been going through them. So why not tell us about soaring fuel prices? I'm sure this comes as no shock that you would...
Well, obviously you'd expect me to go for this one, but we talk about the impact of high prices on the cost of living, etc. But there is getting to the stage where we're seeing more thefts, people not paying, they're driving off, and the actual situation here is the average weekly rate of drive-offs per forecourt grew from 2.1 per week in March 2025 to 3.4 in the same month this year. So, you know, it's gone up more than 50%.
You see, what I can't... look, what people don't realise is that, OK, I think we can all appreciate that the pumps are blooming expensive at the moment. And I'm fairly sure all of us would like a bit of a break from how much we have to pay. I dare say there are plenty out there who can't pay, and that's probably what's leading to the rise in thefts. But at the same time, do you not realise that when you do that, the price goes up for the rest of us? We're the ones who end up paying for it.
Yeah, but they don't think that way at all.
Of course they don't.
And that's the problem with our society at the moment. No one cares about anyone else. And that's the sad thing. And I'm seeing, you know, I'm talking to forecourt, you know, owners, you know, independent garages, and they're seeing a lot of people doing this now. And we're also seeing people filling up their car when they only need... They've probably got more than 3/4 full already, and they're topping it up. These are the sorts of things. They're scared of it going down below halfway. These are the sorts of mentality we have. Fortunately, we haven't seen many queues at garages as yet. And I repeat, the supply of diesel and petrol is fine in this country. No one has to panic.
I do find it extraordinary that we get taken for mugs all the damn time. Let's be honest, that's all that ever happens in this country. Is the great British public are a bunch of mugs because we're allowing these individuals to treat us like this. As you say, there's nothing wrong with fuel. They're not trying to... What are they trying to ration, for crying out loud? The fuel stocks are fine.
That's the point. I mean, the 20% goes through the Strait of Hormuz and 10% goes a bit further south through the Red Sea. That part, in terms of moving to the western side of the world supply. But we've got loads of stuff. And the reason why they can put prices up is because demand's so high. And that's classic marketing. We're going to get that again and again and again. And the worst thing about it, we import most of our diesel from Holland and America. And
so why has that gone up?
But we do
doesn't go anywhere near Hormuz.
But we do export petrol. People forget we actually we do export more of our petrol, even though we've only got 5 refineries compared to the 45 refineries we had about 30 years ago.
Unbelievable. Ernie has messaged, by the way, to say, Phil, on the woman who wants to be euthanized, the reason life is so precious is because if you're not alive, nothing actually exists. And what would be the point of humanity if it didn't have a purpose? Somewhere in there is a very deep and meaningful message, Ernie, and I thank you for it, but I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, my simple brain is struggling to comprehend it. But thank you anyway, all the same. Let's have a look at Generation Z, shall we? Yeah. Apparently they need to get a grip.
That's the pun. A quarter of young people say they are too nervous to shake hands.
I'm sorry, what?
They are too nervous to shake hands. This is what we said.
Nervous? What on earth are they nervous about?
A survey of Gen Z or Gen Z, whatever you want to do, teenagers found 24% would avoid a handshake, while 36% are too shy to look someone in the eye in a conversation.
Right.
1 in 3 people. But I'm looking you straight in the eye.
I was going to say, I'm looking at you now. I consider it rude if I wasn't looking at you.
I know, but this is Gen Z. Youngsters too anxious to offer a handshake. They're sad. They're what's it? Snowflakes. That's what they've become.
Or some might say lily-livered. I'm sorry, I just don't understand.
You're much
this.
stronger with the descriptors.
No, I'm sorry, but I can't get my head around how we've basically what appears to be bred a generation of absolute woke-minded morons who just the simplest of things. What on earth is wrong with shaking hands? Well, why would anyone be nervous to shake hands?
Well, the actual scientist who did this, I can't remember, it's the ACS International Schools boss, Dr. Robert Harrison, one of the report's authors. The poll found 75% of youngsters struggle with social anxiety and 81% fear it will hit their future prospects. Oh, for God's sake.
Blimey, if they struggle with social anxiety, could you just imagine what's going to happen when they live in the real world?
Exactly. That's exactly where I was going.
Dear, oh dear, oh dear. I mean, if you think you've got a problem with shaking someone's hand, you wait until you've got to pay a mortgage. Mind you, say pay a mortgage, and not even get a mortgage at this rate, to be honest. But
different forms of stresses I accept, but I can't believe that it said 81% suffer from social anxiety.
All right. Instead, we're going to ask you to just be mindful of the fact that your microphone is rubbing against your jacket there. So
oh dear, sorry about that.
That's all right.
Okay.
Yeah, no, you're all good. Just obviously want to make sure that we don't want to deafen anyone as a result of it. So the other story that you found as well is about a ban on tobacco for anyone born from 2008 onwards.
That's correct. I mean, a bill banning anyone born after 2008 from buying tobacco in the UK has completed its progress through Parliament in a move that ministers hope will create a smoke-free generation. So anyone under the age of 18 basically cannot buy cigarettes. I thought you couldn't buy them anyway, adult-wise, but apparently, you know, they are absolutely. I mean, obviously the person.
No, but I think, from my understanding, is it's going to be anyone born after 2008 onwards will never be allowed to buy tobacco products. So it doesn't matter even if they're 18, 19, 20, whatever. If you're born after 2008, you will never be able to buy tobacco-based products.
Do you think they're not going to be able to get hold of them?
Oh, I just think they'll go underground.
Exactly.
That's all that's going to happen. Or they'll go to someone who happened to be born in 2009 and say, hey, do you mind being my dealer? Can you get the ciggies for me instead?
Exactly. I mean, we're also... can they buy vapes?
I don't know whether or not the ban includes vapes.
No,
I think it should do. But you know what? There was actually, when I was on the train on the way in before, I was somewhat horrified to see a girl who was wearing school uniform. That's not what I was horrified about. There are plenty of girls who wear school uniform. But she was carrying a vape.
Yeah.
Very boldly and openly.
How old was she, do you think?
Well, she was wearing a uniform. I imagine she has to be 16 and under.
Yeah, okay.
Has to be. Because, you know, anyone who's over 16 goes into the upper and they don't have a uniform. But the fact that she clearly thought that it was okay or cool, I suppose, to carry it. Do me a favour, for goodness sake, what is wrong with people? And apart from anything, how on earth does a school pupil get a hold of a vape? So I just think we're trading one problem for another. And there are a great number of... I can't believe the number of people who I see vaping all over the place now. And I think people are under the delusion that vaping is somehow better for you. It might be
it isn't.
Less bad than tobacco.
Well, my background, I'm a pharmacologist by training, scientist, so I can promise you it's a bit like cannabis, etc. People say, oh, cannabis is not a problem. I'm sorry, but these products actually do cause a lot of damage to your body. And particularly vapes, the chemicals in there actually do. We talked about earlier about cancer detection. There's a lot of cancers that are created by these vape chemicals. So you mentioned about adults will actually see this as an opportunity to sell cheap fags to youngsters.
Absolutely. Howard Cox, founder of Fair Fuel UK. It's been an absolute treat to have you for the Paper of the Hour. Thank you very much indeed. Much appreciated. I dare say we'll see you very, very soon right here on the home of common sense. Right. Up next is Talkback. It's your chance to have your say on all of the day's news. The whole hour is dedicated to you. 0344 499 1000. Get your calls in nice and quickly. I want to have a chat with you. It's Phil Dave in for Petrie Hosken here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning to you and happy St. George's Day. Yes, it is the 23rd of April now, so officially it is St. George's Day. This is Phil Dave in for Petrie Hosken with you until 1 o'clock this morning here on Talk. And this is indeed Talkback. The whole hour is a blank canvas dedicated to you. That's right, my running order has nothing on it. It's absolutely open to whatever you want to talk about. 0344 499 1000 is the phone number. Do get involved because I would absolutely love for you to have your say on any of the stories that we have been talking about this evening. But in particular, one thing that I do want to talk to you about is this really rather extraordinary story. And that is that obviously in a world where London's booming rental market is supposed to, well, so the law says anyway, have the door open to everyone, some sort of damning new investigation has actually revealed that there is something in the way of a shadow market where the rules of the Equality Act simply do not apply. And across Facebook, Gumtree, and certain encrypted Telegram channels, landlords are illegally slamming the door in the faces of thousands, advertising quote-unquote Muslim-only rentals and explicitly filtering tenants by religion, race and nationality. Isn't this just unbelievable? So apparently from Walthamstow to Barking, the message being sent is don't bother applying, as it demands for Muslim boys only, or direct appeals to specific ethnic groups. Now, these listings aren't just preferences, they are actually a direct violation of British law. And while some point to shared living spaces as something in the way of a grey area, the reality on the ground is a blatant no to anyone who doesn't fit a specific religious profile. So I want to know, is this a case of communities seeking comfort, or is it a dangerous erosion of the fair play values that underpin our society? What do you think? 0344 499 1000. And in particular, I want to know the question, is it ever acceptable to be selective based on race or religion? Because I certainly can't think of any example of when it's okay. Is it ever acceptable to be selective based on race or religion? 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number to call and have your say. Please remember, calls are charged at national rate. You can also text your message to 87222. Just remember, start your message with the word talk, because otherwise it disappears off into the ether and we'll never see it, and that would be very much a waste of your typing efforts, but also it'd be a shame because I do want to see it. And of course you can always send a WhatsApp message to 0344 499 1000. It's including, by the way, a voice message if you would like. It would be great to hear from you and great to have a chat with you on this Thursday morning, St George's Day, the 23rd of April. Some of the messages coming in here. Bob in Nottingham. Phil, it's been a great 3 shows. That's very nice. Some great guests. Thank you. You're done good. Well, that's very kind of you to say so, Bob. I do appreciate it. Brian has messaged to say happy St George's Day, but also, could you say happy 99th birthday to my Aunt Cis? Is it Cis? C-I-S? Okay. Maybe Cecilia or something. But one way or another, very happy birthday and many happy returns to your aunt, Brian. How exciting. 99. Wow. If you want to get your thoughts in, please don't hesitate. Would love to hear from you. It's exactly what Heather in Govan has done. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning, Phil, and a happy St George's Day.
Happy St George's Day, Heather.
I raise it based on decisions. I put unacceptable because it is unacceptable to base on one religion and one faith on acceptance of a property. It is morally and morally unacceptable, and it's got no base whatsoever. I believe in meritocracy for one reason. I don't give a damn on people's race, religion, sexuality, colour of the skin. I believe in based on meritocracy in a property. It's based on 2 principles. Have you got the bond for the money for the rent for the flat? For one, have you got the month's rent in advance in your hand to pay for the property? That's all it should be all about. It should be basically simple and easy to do, and that's how it should be.
Well, Heather, I tend to agree with what you're saying, but at the same time, I guess the counter-argument that would have to be, if it is an individual's property, isn't it theirs to do whatever they want with?
Well, I used to be in private rental back in 1990. I've never had no problems with that whatsoever back then. And one thing about, is it morally right for the person who owns the property, i.e. house or flats, privately, to choose? It's basically, it's the right person. It doesn't mean religion, sexuality, or even the colour of your skin.
I just think that it's completely and utterly mind-blowing. You know, it just doesn't make sense, because to my mind, it's a bit like stepping back in time, a bit like Howard Cox was saying in the previous hour, going back to a time where people would have signs outside maybe hotels or shops saying no Jews, no blacks, and no dogs, or what have you, as if somehow those three groups were all clubbed together. It sort of feels a bit like that, but almost inverted.
Do you remember, Phil, there's been a news about a bedsit in a seaside area where they say no homosexuals allowed in that bed.
Vaguely, you know, now that you mention it, I do vaguely remember that.
Yeah, because, like, I remember that news. It was in the papers, and it was on the news on the media. And when I look at that, that is wrong. You cannot based on one sexuality to be banned from a bed and breakfast hotel. It's morally wrong.
Well, I would argue that it's morally wrong in all walks of life to say that just because someone happens to be a religion, a sexuality, I don't mean asexual, but you know what I mean, like a sort of a particular sexuality, a particular skin colour, whatever it is. And for goodness sake, we live in a day and age where people are so hell-bent on highlighting our differences rather than what unites us. And by the way, I blame successive governments for that, because the way I look at it is that it's the oldest form of rule. It's divide and conquer. It's let the governing body, the authorities, point out what is so vastly different, in inverted commas, about us, rather than highlighting what unites us. And all I think anyone in their right mind needs to understand is that if someone cuts themselves, they bleed. And that's the kind of thing that unites us. We all need food and water to live, to survive. We all have feelings. Everyone has physical and mental health. Now, they might be in good health, they might be in bad health, but the point being is that we still have it. All of these things are stark reminders that we are just human. And yet we have a political elite who go out of their way trying to cause division. And this is the result of what we're seeing here. The fact that you've got any community, and I don't want to blame the whole community because that's very wrong, but there are certain individuals from a community who feel that emboldened that they have the audacity in a Christian country to turn round and to say that they would only rent their property to someone of their faith is just revolting. It is not okay. And apart from anything, it's illegal. Rightly so. So why are we not seeing these individuals pounced on by the authorities? Why aren't we seeing these individuals brought to task, brought to justice, prosecuted for breaking the Equality Act? The Equality Act that is there, that says that racism of any kind is wrong. And I would like to think we could all agree with that. But yet you look at cases such as that of Lucy Connolly, where she sends out, don't get me wrong, a message on socials that I don't agree with, but yet she's punished. She's imprisoned for it. And then there are these landlords, apparently, who are going around discriminating and in no uncertain terms saying, we don't really want tenants unless they're from our community. But as I said to Heather just now, I suppose on the other hand, it's their property, they could do with what they want with. No? You tell me. 0344 499 1000. Message from Gary. Morning, Frank. Lol. Who's Frank? These landlords should feel the full force of the law for being racists and should also lose their landlord licenses. Also, I'm not surprised younger people wouldn't fight for our country when they are not given any future to look forward to. Can't disagree with that. Although I can imagine you as a soldier. Gracious, here we go. Right, I can just picture you in the uniform. Great week, Brian, gonna miss you. I don't know who Frank is, I don't know who Brian is, but Gary in Glasgow, I know you've messaged before and I know you know who I am, so thank you. Well, I know you know I'm Phil, anyway. Let's see. Great week, Brian. Oh, anyway, I'm missing something here. Dave is in Essex. Good morning, Dave.
Good morning, Phil.
How are you, sir?
Right, I'm here.
Well, that's the spirit.
Yeah, against all the odds. But anyway, let's call it one of my dying wishes, is to see Lord Hermer and a few others, Starmer included, this Chagos Islands deal.
Oh, yes.
It has to be, in my lifetime, one of the shadiest deals ever. If I've got an MOT failure sat on my driveway, I can make a phone call and a man will call round and he will pay me, well, as least as possible. Obviously, he's in business. But he will pay me to take that car away, not the other way round. It's as simple as that. You don't pay someone to take something off your hands like the Chagos Islands. Strategically, most important probably in the world now at this moment in time. Mauritius is well known as a corrupt government. So if you get Starmer and Hermer, who are corrupt, believe you me, dealing with a corrupt government, it leads to big...
Dave. You might believe that Starmer and Hermer are corrupt, but of course we have to suggest that they would probably argue otherwise, and indeed, until they're both criminally convicted of something, we can't really necessarily just go making statements such as that. But
yes, innocent until proven guilty, but exactly. Unfortunately the wind at this moment in time is not playing very well for them, is it?
No, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are corrupt. I can understand why people might feel that, but you know, if that's a feeling, then that's a bit different to actually categorically proving it.
Well, let's say it wants looking into then. Shall we say that? It wants a serious...
Fair enough, we can say that. Absolutely.
Yes. The private meeting between Lammy, Mandelson, when he was in government, or was supposed to be, and Michael Gove, a private meeting. Was that about the Chagos Islands? We never found out. I never found out, and I've delved and looked into it.
Dave, one thing that strikes me as very, very strange in all of this is that there's a bit of a common theme here, and it flies in the face of British armed forces and indeed our military and the protection of our country. So with the Chagos Islands, I would suggest that giving away territory that is fundamental in our military action, or in you know what I'm saying, so basically fundamental to the strategic military operations to protect the UK, to give that away seemed very counterintuitive, and it seems even more counterintuitive to try and prosecute military personnel in the name of saying that they carried out war crimes against people who, let's be honest, would kill us Brits as soon as look at us. And I don't really sort of see who in their right mind would start prosecuting members of the armed forces when they were just following Labour Party orders.
Well, I've spoke about this many times, that Lord Hermer and Starmer involved in that, prosecuting our armed forces. These people who they're prosecuting, unlike me or you, sit safely in their homes. They're called out to do a job of fighting war, what they're trained for. They have a split second to make a decision, him or me, and they're being prosecuted for that. You know, who can make that decision correctly in a split second? Because that's all they have. You know, it's not as if they get notice that someone's going to shoot you. You know, it's just, to me, it's wrongful. It is persecution. There is no two ways about it. Our soldiers are out there. These soldiers don't join the army just to go out and kill people.
Well, I'd like to think that most people join the armed forces to keep people alive rather than having to kill anyone.
Exactly. It's a career, and a good career. I've never been in the armed forces, but it's a good career, for young men. But they're being put off. They're being
certainly used to be. I don't know whether or not if we're that good at looking after our armed forces anymore. You say it's a good career. Maybe it used to be. When we hear about these veterans who wind up on the streets, I just think that's absolutely shocking. This is, if you think of it like this, the way that we allow military personnel to wind up on the streets, homeless and desolate, and yet we always seem to have money to put people who come over here illegally into either hotels or HMOs, houses of multiple occupation, barracks, whatever you want to call it. All of this money that we've got to put into that to house people who don't protect this country. In fact, if anything, some of them might cause harm to this country. And yet the individuals who do protect the country, we let them wind up on the streets sometimes. Everything flies in the face of what used to be described as common sense. But let's be honest, now it's just, I don't even know what it is. I think it's absolutely strange, bizarre, insane, mad, ridiculous, any other word I can possibly think of to describe it. Who in their right mind goes after the people protecting this country? How is that okay? Why is that okay? You've got to be deranged to think that is acceptable. Dave, thank you for your call. 0344 499 1000 if you'd like to get involved in the conversation. Plenty of free lines, and we've got loads of time before 1 o'clock this morning, so have your say, give me a shout. I'd love to speak to you. Messages come in here from Aaron. Regarding the racists advertising their properties for Muslims only, it's time the British population started sticking together. Aaron says, if I owned a property, I wouldn't be renting it out to Muslims. Come on, Aaron, that's not the answer. Sorry. That makes you just as bad. If you notice the homeless population, it's 99% white British. We're the bottom of all lists now with third-class citizens in our own country. I do understand why people think like that. As I was just saying, we allow people who were veterans to wind up on the street, homeless. It's just absolutely ridiculous and totally and utterly morally wrong, abhorrent, and please, someone explain to me why. Why, when so many of us can see how wrong that is and how totally and utterly unacceptable to anyone with half a brain, why do our political class not see that? Or some of our political class not see that? 0344 499 1000. Get your calls in. Let's have a chat about this. There's so much to talk about, and I know you have an opinion on it. So why not give me a shout? After all, your opinion matters. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk. It's Talkback. It's the hour of the show dedicated entirely to you, your comments and your opinions. 0344 499 1000. Hey, give us a call. Come on. I want to have a chat with you. I love talking to you. And besides, as this is actually my last show for the moment, because to be honest with you, I don't know what I'm next on. Petrie's back quite rightly on Monday. She's only having a well-deserved week off. And so as a result of it, I'd like to have a little natter with you whilst I can. 0344 499 1000. Gary's message back, by the way, to say, Phil, I intentionally got your name wrong twice because other listeners keep doing it. My little joke. Sorry I missed it, Gary. I'm afraid that sometimes humour doesn't always translate very well into a WhatsApp message, but I appreciate it all the same. So what are we talking about this evening? I hear you cry, or this morning now, technically speaking. Well, happy St. George's Day, by the way, if you've just tuned in, because it is the 23rd of April, and it is indeed St. George's Day. So, and when I say, of course, we've got George pressing the buttons, so, you know, technically this is your day, George, isn't it? There you go. What are we talking about? Well, we're talking about a couple of stories. One that I really wanted to get your thoughts on was this idea that there seems to be some sort of like what one might describe as a bit of a dark market out there in the world of London rentals, London property. Now, if you're listening outside of London, it's irrelevant. You can listen to this and you can have an opinion on it, absolutely. Because what we're talking about are landlords who have posted on various social media sites stating that they only want to rent out their properties to people from Muslim backgrounds. And so that obviously flies in the face of the Equalities Act. The Equalities Act is terribly clear, and it states in no uncertainty that you can't discriminate like that. And yet there are landlords out there who think that somehow that rule doesn't apply to them, that law doesn't apply to them, and they can discriminate. But I'd like to know, why are they not being prosecuted for it? I want to know why they're not being picked up on this and why they are not facing the full force of the law. Because you and I both know that if it was any other situation, say for example, some individual decided to advertise a property and say only Christian applicants need apply, or white tenants need apply, there would understandably, and rightly so, be outrage. So where is the outrage over this? Because I think it's disgusting. I think it is totally and utterly unacceptable to say to someone that if you're not the religion that I am, I don't want to do business with you. Could you just imagine anywhere else doing that? Let's just look at supermarkets, for example. Could you imagine if a supermarket turned around and said, we're only going to deal with Christian customers? It's as bonkers as that. It doesn't make sense. And yet, we have a situation where that is happening. And by the way, I don't think this is only one or two landlords doing this. This has got big enough now, where the Telegraph has managed to do an investigation on it and has clearly come up with several landlords who feel the need to do this. Now, I should point out that it's amazing how some of those adverts are rapidly trying to be removed so that the evidence is no longer there. And you and I know that had the Telegraph not done this investigation, those adverts would continue to be there. You have to ask what the motivation is. You have to ask why. Why would anyone think that is remotely acceptable in a Christian country? And now before you start messaging in, I am fully aware that it's a country that is based on Christian values, but maybe Christianity is not the majority religion anymore. Well, I'm sorry, but it is a Christian country because it's based on Christianity. So even if Christianity isn't the majority religion anymore, it is still the fact that this country is founded on Christian belief. But the fact you've got people who think that they can choose their religion and say that unless you follow that religion, which, by the way, we should remember, is still a minority, The fact they can turn around and they can say that I only want you to apply if you follow Islam. Really? There is just something so wrong with that. 0344 499 1000. Now, of course, on the other hand, there are people who are going to say, but it's their property. They can do whatever they want. If they want to rent out to someone that they feel comfortable with dealing with, how is it any of our business? Those who are listening to last night's show would have heard me say that when I was speaking to Kevin in Basingstoke, and he was talking about the redistribution of wealth, I made the argument saying that it is absolutely nobody's business but that individuals, what they do with their money. So I can't be a complete hypocrite, because surely that means then in that case that it's that landlord and their property to do whatever they want with. But what is the motivation? Why would anyone think that that is an acceptable way to behave? 0344 499 1000. Dave has messaged him, by the way, on WhatsApp saying, I would return to fight for England, but only for the pending civil war. Gracious. Dave's over in New Zealand. Thank you very much for that, Dave. Right. Coming up in just a moment's time, we're going to speak to Jerry, who's in Burton-on-Trent. But you can get your call in as well. 0344 499 1000. This is Talkback. It's Phil Dave in for Petrie Hosken with you until 1 o'clock this morning. Come on, have your say. I know you want to. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk. It's Talkback with Phil Dave in for Petrie Hosken with you until 1 o'clock this morning. Oh, we only have about half an hour left. Come on, get those calls in. 0344 499 1000. If you want to join in the discussion, that's exactly what Jerry in Burton-on-Trent has done. Jerry, a very good morning to you and happy St George's Day.
Oh, very much so. Happy to St George's Day to you too, good sir. It's a shame we didn't open the lines up with Howard Cox, because he's always very good value, and I had a few points for him, actually.
Oh, but, well, you're welcome to make those points to me if you want. I appreciate it. I'm not Howard Cox, but, you know, you're very welcome to make them all the same.
He's such a good man. I think it's all... I mean, I don't think we should be surprised, Phil. We shouldn't be surprised. I mean, we spent too long being surprised, and after a while it becomes the norm, and then something else comes up that... Well,
so just to make it clear to anyone who may have just tuned in, sorry, I think we should have just set the backstory here. You're talking, obviously, about these landlords who have been advertising on social media saying that they only want Muslim tenants to apply.
Absolutely. And you've got to think, well, who's outraged the most? Well, of course, it's those who let's face it, are slightly right of centre. I won't say far right because I'm sick of that label anyway. And
don't you know, even if you're right of centre, Jerry, you're far right. That's what you are. You can't possibly have mild conservative values. You're far right.
Yeah, we've been right so far. That's how I look at it.
Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm poking the bear a bit here. I apologise. Sorry, please do continue.
No. You see, we're always the one cutting the slack. We're the ones that do reason. We do try and be inclusive. And yet, this is where it comes down to that all too common a term, EDI. And that really is a cancer for the country. It truly is.
But, you know, Jerry, I wouldn't want to be any other way. I want to be all-inclusive. And as far as I'm concerned, I think that if those of us who know how to be inclusive are forced into a situation where we feel the need to start backtracking and then start being exclusive, then I believe that only makes us as bad as the people we're talking about now.
Well, the problem about all these labels, of course, and you look at Starmer when he gets up and talks about the far right, and you know you can see that there'll come a time where they want to ban reform as a party. You know,
I've often thought that, yeah.
You know, you see Starmer saying, "Oh, divisive," and you know these terrible hatred, and you think, no, just look at the banners that get raised when these organised groups of leftists go out, all paid for, you know, by Soros and probably various unions and that type of thing, all united under one banner, not allowed to be interviewed. No transparency there, no discussion. No, it's all very, very contrived and, well, dare I say it, quite worrying, really.
But isn't it fascinating, though, the way that all of these individuals who think they are do-gooders, which we can see they're not, they're far from do-gooders, they go under the banner of that because what they're trying to do is they're trying to use very clever words to push their own agenda and to make those who've got more of a level head about things and actually more, shall we say, common interest in heart rather than selfish interests at heart look like the evil ones. So all of these things such as far right, or, you know, sort of saying that's divisive, racist, they're all very clever words that they are using because they've got nothing else.
Exactly
and I've long said this, you know, when I have had the good fortune of being able to air my views on this station and others as well, but in particular on this station, and often I'm pitted against someone who maybe has opposing views to my own, but yet the sign, I think, of a decent individual who agrees in debate and knows how to have a good old-fashioned discussion is someone who will intelligently put across their point of view and explain why I might be wrong to think the way I do. But I can't count the number of individuals who allegedly have opposing views to me, and the only thing they can do is call me disgusting, call me racist, call me... I'm not racist. I might be disgusting, but that's, you know, that's an individual's choice to make. I suppose I don't think I am. But what I'm trying to get at is that all they've got going for them are just personal attacks. They can't coherently come up with a counter-argument. Well,
I've got a theory, and I think that when you look at the decades, because I'm, you know, I've hit a good few decades in my time, I've got a theory, Phil, that the last 14 years of Tories has the label capitalism, and who wants that? And they haven't seen capitalism, well, we haven't seen capitalism work for decades. So, of course, everyone thinks, well, why not try the alternative? I mean, we don't really know what communism is, and if communism means...
I'm fairly sure communism hasn't worked in communist countries, so if they could actually... It's the same kind of premise as when people talk about PR, the proportional representation voting system. I know of countries that have PR, and it's an absolute disaster. I can understand why people question the first past the post, but to tell you the truth, and if you think that decisions don't get made under first past the post, you try it under PR and see if any decisions ever get made. It's not a decent alternative. And it's exactly the same with capitalism. Capitalism might not be a perfect structure for a society, but believe me, communism, Marxism isn't any better. If anything, it's 100 times worse.
Well, you see, the problem with it is that without enough knowledge about history and what really life's like under communism, people just see it as an opportunity for the state to do everything. Look at the young people saying they prefer a dictator. Doesn't that tell you something? And there are people spreading this stuff, and they are financed to have these ideas. This is the other thing, that the red's under the bed, which used to be the label. And, you know, when you talk about Britain as a country and to be proud of, it's almost vulgar to be patriotic. So you see...
Well, I don't think it is vulgar. It's St. George's Day, and I'm very proud to be patriotic.
Absolutely. But I think that's where it stems from. I think it stems from... If the Tories had run the country well for 14 years or done a reasonably good job, then people may not be quite so opposing about let's go for anything but what we've had over the last 14 years. And everyone says that's capitalism. So younger people say, well, we don't want any of that. And they're easily sold on the idea of...
03444991000. Thank you very much indeed for your call. Michael in North Yorkshire, stay right where you are because we've got to go and pay the rent, but we will speak to you in just a moment's time. Get your call in. Still enough time to have a chat with you. What do you think of this? The question I have got for you is it ever acceptable to be selective based on race or religion? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk. It's Phil Dave in for Petrie Hosken. Back in a jiffy.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hi, this is indeed Talkback. It's the last section of this little feast of radio, and I'm afraid you've only got another 15 minutes to get your say in. So come on, give me a call, 0344 499 1000. Michael in North Yorkshire, I'm coming to you in just a second, but I want to very quickly read out this text message from Andrew in Salisbury. He says, I would deport or confiscate the properties of these landlords where possible. But I hate to tell you, Phil, the Hasidic Jewish community in London have been doing exactly the same thing for decades, but it's done by word of mouth and not the internet. And Andrew, let me be really clear, right? I don't want to sound like I'm just picking on the Muslim community, and I fully understand that sort of off the back of this article in the Telegraph, it would be, you'd be forgiven for thinking that I was doing that. But I don't agree with it, whoever it is, exactly the same way. I don't agree if it is indeed the Hasidim are saying that their properties are exclusively for, or anyone saying that they would rather exclusively rent to anyone based on religion or race. I don't agree with it. And the Equalities Act is very, very clear. You cannot do that. It is illegal. And I think anyone who thinks they can should face the law. 0344 499 1000. He's been waiting very patiently. Michael in North Yorkshire, a very good morning to you and happy St George's Day.
Happy St George's Day to you as well, Phil.
What can I do for you, sir?
I think we've been very slowly appropriated over the years. Let me start at the beginning. I left school late 70s, went to sea as a merchant seaman. After a few years, the Merchant Navy started taking on foreign crews. One of the old boys on one of the ships I was on said, when this goes shoreside, we're finished. Now, fast forward a few years, I was a soldier, I left, and I was a truck driver. When Tony Blair opened up the borders to the Eastern Bloc countries that joined the EU, it was a case of, if you don't like your pay, you don't like your conditions, there's the gate. I'll get a Polish driver or a Czech driver or a Romanian driver. We last saw it big style with P&O in Dover when they sacked all.
Oh, that was shocking, that, yeah.
And the reason they got away with it is because none of the ships are registered anymore in the UK. They're registered in Nassau or Monrovia or wherever. So under a flag of convenience, they can do that. And now it's happening in the UK society. We're getting it now with RAF recruitment the other year. You're getting it with adverts for the government. Whites needn't apply. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Totally and utterly. And actually, the other thing...
We've slowly been appropriated and we've allowed it to happen. And I think this is why we've got these marches now of the flag-waving Brits, because they've suddenly realised that their opportunities are no more.
Yeah, look, totally and utterly. And it is really quite revolting how white British individuals, in particular I'm going to say white British men, I think, are really the ones who are just being pushed to one side. Now, even if, right, even if there was any issue or truth in the fact that with every walk of life, the go-to was a white British man, and that needed to be evened out. I personally, and maybe I would say this as a white British guy, I'd say that I've always believed that as long as someone can do the job, I don't care who they are, what their sex is, what their religion is, what their skin colour is. I know plenty of people from all walks of life who do an amazing job, say, for example, right here in the building I work in. I never once thought, oh, thank God they tick a box, and thank goodness they don't make this place look so white. But there is definitely this feeling of deliberate pushback against white British men. And I tell you where I think the best example that I've seen this is, and by the way, there are plenty of people who are really shocked when I say this so boldly, because of course they think, oh, you can't say that, it's racist. Well, no, I tell you what's racist is saying that because someone is a white British bloke that they can't do something or they can't apply. It's inverted racism. It's not inverted, it's racism. Let's be honest. It's just swung, the pendulum has swung the other way.
Absolutely.
But there is an advertising campaign on the London Underground. Now, I appreciate if those listening outside of London, this doesn't mean very much, and of course your good self being one of those individuals, Michael. But
yeah, but I'm from that part of the world.
No, I know. But there's an advertising campaign on the London Underground at the moment where it talks about how every journey matters. And what they do is they have examples of all the different types of passengers who use the London Underground. But staggeringly, there is no example of a good old-fashioned, say, city gent, I describe. So no one wearing, say, a hat and a suit or anything like that, clearly sort of like that kind of style of individual who would have long been associated perhaps with the city. They don't exist. But yet every single other flipping box you could think of that is ticked is there. Now that doesn't surprise me at all because, I mean, this is Sadiq Khan's London for you. But this constant pitting people against each other based on skin colour, based on race, based on religion, is just, it's just revolting. Why can't we just start being treated like one human race? Or is that a bit too Pollyanna-ish?
No, absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, I come from a military family. My father and all his brothers were Royal Navy. I was Merchant Navy. My eldest son followed me into the Merchant Navy. But he was a fully trained silver service waiter, worked in Michelin-starred restaurants, yet when he applied to Cunard, they turned him down. And it was purely because his expectations of wages were higher than the Indian crew that mainly manned the ship.
Yeah, and this importing of cheap labour, I think, as much as I know it's come up in conversation before, and obviously I think most of us can realise what a major issue it is for, well, certainly those of us who are trying to get jobs and maybe struggle to do so because basically we can't find decent enough paid jobs. I don't blame companies for trying to save money, but what I do blame is successive governments allowing this kind of situation to unfold in the first place. How dare they allow companies to put profit so far and above people just being able to survive and being paid enough to survive?
Well, I agree. I no longer work because I've got a heart condition and whatever. I'm not allowed to drive. I've had my licences taken off me. But I worked for one of the biggest companies in the world, NYK, which is Japanese. And I was on, well, I'm going back probably 15, 20 years now. I was on a good wage for working 4 nights a week, put it that way. They started employing foreign drivers on £3 an hour less.
Dear, dear.
And we were expected not to have a pay rise the following year because they were on less. And they lost drivers hand over fist. I worked in Land Rover on nights,
yeah,
doing shunting, and I was earning nearly 500. Well, it's 20 years ago, so I was earning £500 a week for 4 nights a week. They were employing blokes doing exactly the same job, exactly the same company next to me, earning 350 a week.
Blimey. But again, I don't blame the companies. You know what? We'd all save money if we could.
No, but that's where the rot set in. Do you understand? It's all the companies and businessmen. It filters through to them, and then they can start choosing what they're doing. No one's going to stop somebody leasing to just Muslims because now they'll be called racist. And that's what I meant at the start of the conversation. We've been appropriated very slowly, very insidiously
Well, I think what we've actually been is conditioned. I think we've been conditioned to believe that if you dare speak out against any minority, and let me be really clear, I'm from a minority background. I've never made that any hidden secret. But if you speak out in the majority against any minority background, somehow you're racist, somehow you're a horrible human being. And I think that's ridiculous. And it's all boils down, I think, to one fundamental and very simple principle that actually explains an awful lot of what has gone wrong in this country. And that is this idea of pandering to the minority, or minorities, I should say. And there are so many examples of this. Have a look at all that's going on with the transgender movement at the moment. The last time I checked, don't quote me on this as an exact figure, but it's something along the lines of the transgender community makes up something like 0.0025% of the population of Great Britain. And yet the fuss being made about whether or not we should have gender-neutral toilets, or whether or not men who identify as women should be allowed in women-only spaces, women who identify as men should be allowed in men-only spaces. All of this faffing around with that particular discussion is on the basis of pleasing 0.0025% of the population. So does that mean that the remaining population, it doesn't A, affect them, and B, it possibly displeases them? Well, then how does that make sense? Who in their right mind would say that you're going to aim to satisfy a fraction of the population? Now, again, I don't know off the top of my head, statistically or percentage-wise, how many people in this country are Muslim. I believe that it is something along the lines of around 4.5 million. And in a country of 69 million, well then, I mean, you do the maths, or whatever. That basically means that there's around 64 million people in this country who don't identify as Muslim or don't follow the Muslim faith. But yet, if you're going to go out of your way to come up with policies that exclude members of the Muslim community from having to adhere to British law, and let me be really clear when I say this, right? I get very unnerved at the prospect of tarnishing all Muslims with the same brush, because first and foremost, it's incredibly wrong to tarnish all with any sort of brush. Everyone's an individual. I know plenty of people of Muslim faith who wouldn't dream of behaving the way that some of the fundamentalists do. But yet, if you're going to come up with laws or actually give examples of saying that the law doesn't apply to someone because of their faith, what sort of message does that send out? And how does that make for a fair and just society? Because aren't these the same individuals who bang on about wanting equality for all? How can you have equality for all if you're going to say that an individual just from a certain background is excluded from the law? I find it baffling, I really do. There's a message from Danielle here in Colorado. It says, Phil, fabulous 3 days, thank you. Plus your guests were far less woke than usual. Don't know what you're talking about, very naughty. You will be missed next week. We need more of you on air. Have a good rest of your week. Danielle, that is incredibly kind of you. Well, look, you won't hear an argument from me. I would very happily come back sometime soon and have a chat with all of you, because I've absolutely loved it. So thank you very much indeed to you for the pleasure of your company for the last 3 shows. Petrie is back on Monday after her very well-earned week off. Also, I have to say huge thanks to all of our guests for today's show. Thank you, of course, to Howard Cox. And, of course, we have to say a huge thank you as well to Colonel Patrick Mercer for his views earlier on as well. And for all of your calls and your messages, you know, it is enormously appreciated. Up next is the overnight show on Talk Sport. Paul Ross will be with you here for extra time, so please do stay tuned and listen to him. And don't forget that it'll be Mark Dolan in at breakfast for Jeremy Kyle this morning from 6 o'clock. So I do hope that you will stay tuned to the home of Common Sense for that.